had mentioned this before. There's been so many great speakers here, but in the Middle East, power talks, right? And if rule number one in the Middle East is that power rules, rule number 1A is that you don't get beat up by the Jews. And at the moment, Israel is kind of forcing their will on Tehran at the moment, and so they have to go back and forth with the Israelis. This strike back against the Americans was simply because even with the internet shut off across Iran, this blast in Fordo was massive. Everyone knew it took place. They had to symbolically strike back in some way, and from all the reports that I've seen, and actually reports that I got from inside of Israel and people very, very connected there, everyone knew this was coming. This was conveyed hours before. Someone in coordination almost with the U.S., but everyone knew this was coming. It was a way for them to save face, and also a way for America to ensure that they don't get drawn in to a further escalation here. Right, and so they kind of let them have their small strike back to save face on that end. But if they didn't, it's why the regime is in such a precarious position. A police state regime maintains its authority to hold the population at bay through the projection of force. And if you are hit by the great Satan, so to speak, and you don't hit back whatsoever after having the crap kicked out of you for the last 11 days by the Jews, you suddenly project a weakness that might bring the regime to the brink.
And if I may jump in with some additional news, it does look like, based on flight radar, that UAE airspace has been reopened. So that does look like that maybe the region is going back to a sense of normalcy. And I guess time will tell, and we'll have to track to see if Qatar airspace went open, Bahrain, etc. But UAE strong airspace has been open. Say that again, Justin?
Strong horse and weak horse. I mean, this is where the Americans basically have exerted themselves as the strong horse in the situation. Iran is on the ropes, and they are the weak horse now. And I think the bombing was basically a way for them to save face, and we'll see where this goes from here.
Piotr, I don't know who was the next speaker, so I'll just defer to you while I was looking for news.
No worries, mate. Yeah. No, I'm just trying to make plenty of news coming in about the situation. I mean, to me personally, I think the Iranians are very much focused on the Israelis. They don't want the United States to get further involved. I think they expect them to know that the US will fund Israel or whatever, indirectly. But if they can ensure that the Americans aren't militarily active as well, that's a benefit for them, I think. Anas, you've had your hand up, Leona Zingle, I recognise you guys.
Yes, couple of things here. When the U.S. Energy Information Administration says that the U.S. imports 4% from the Gulf states, we got to be very careful with that. It does not mean the Persian Gulf, because most of those imports are from the western part of Saudi Arabia and the Red Sea, and therefore it does not go through the Hormuz Strait. So this is a very important distinction between importing from the Gulf states or importing from the, from they call them sometimes Persian Gulf states, or through the Hormuz Strait. So the Hormuz Strait basically is way, way lower because most of those imports come from the western ports of Saudi Arabia. On the China comment, he is right when he said that the consumption of China is really high and 1.1 billion can be used quickly. But if you look at this the same way at the amount of food that comes to Iran through the Hormuz Strait, Iranians will go hungry before China runs out of oil. Back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, mate. Just a bit of information here. Flight radar is sharing that air traffic seems to be returning to normal gradually. UAE flights are moving again. Bahrain and Kuwait flights coordinating for movement in the next hour. No extensions of closures are possible. So that's from flight radar in the past 2 minutes. Leona, it was you, I believe, next, and then Zingle.
Hi, thanks. So, just like we were talking about yesterday on this space, the fact that are now under threat and we just saw an attack. This is exactly what I was saying yesterday. I don't think it's very easy to get out of this right now. I don't agree with what Trump did attacking Iran. I do not think it was an imminent threat. It was not constitutional. I know there are many that disagree with me, but I can read the Constitution too, and I know what the War Powers Act says. The fact that all these, the fact that Iran is a sovereign nation, they're a bad regime, which most of us detest, but they're not going to roll over. And I think now the Pentagon is going to they might have to start sending reinforcements over there. This is exactly what we wanted to avoid. And just real quick, and then I'll go to the next speaker. Regarding oil prices, I don't buy this sell-off one bit. From a technical perspective, the oil chart looks like a coiled spring. OPEC, the cartel in the Middle East, increased production in June by 411,000 barrels, which is an increase in surplus, which puts downward pressure on the oil.
Just to add a bit of confirmation here, so SITREP, if you haven't seen already as well, there is a reconfirmation that the Trump doesn't want more American engagement in the Middle East. Senior White House official told CNN. So that's a second, official source stating that. So it seems clear that the US doesn't want to get further into this at the moment. It could change, of course, but Leon, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, and that is a good point, but that affirms what I just said. Even though we might not want to get involved in an endless war, I do believe this opens. I think it's now very difficult to withdraw because now the U.S. government, the Pentagon, we are obligated to defend U.S. Central Command and basically what we just did in Iran. If they want to continue trying to show revenge, we are obligated to defend ourselves now. And so that's what's going on here.
So just additional news. U.S. officials are saying. And we know the Qataris have said this, but that not a single one of the ballistic missiles fired tonight by Iran impacted inside IUD airbase in Qatar. Let me say, not a single ballistic missile that Iran launched against IUD airbase.
They're folding.
Impacted. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting scenario that not a single one hit IUD airbase per U.S. officials. I mean, I guess.
But is that deliberate, or is that because the Iranians couldn't manage to do anything?
Well, I mean, I don't know how. I think what the Qataris are claiming, all of them were intercepted, and the videos that we were sharing earlier did look like a lot of them were successful interceptions. I'm assuming they wanted to hit IUD airbase. I mean, what else are they going to target?
So can I just jump in, Sid?
Yeah, go ahead.
Piotr, I actually tagged you in some videos that one of my old drivers back in Qatar, you used to work for me, sent me a ton of videos, and I've sent them all to you, and I tagged you in them. So I think the best thing that we can say is that no one did get hurt, no Americans have been hurt, so therefore there's no blood here in the middle, and I'm glad that's happened. I'm glad that no missiles hit Qatar as well, because I love Qatar. It's the country of my birth, and I don't want to see one millimeter of its land damaged in any way, shape, or form. I'm an Iranian patriot and I love my country as well, but I don't want to see something happen to the country of my birth. My dad is buried there, my brother is buried there, and one day I will most probably be buried there as well alongside my father and my brother. So I'm glad that didn't happen, and I just hope that no one wants to stir it and make it any worse than it already is, and we can just draw a line under this situation and we can get back to, hopefully, Israel stopping killing people and Iran doesn't have to attack them because they're not being attacked. This needs to be a time when we can just stop the violence, because if we don't, the potential for global economic destruction, hunger, and the catastrophe of the oil civilization ending, which it could do quite easily within 45 minutes to an hour, is all it will take to destroy the 45 critical oil fields and terminals which deliver the oil and the gas of the world. Ras Laffan in Qatar delivers 20% of the world's gas supply. 2 or 3 well-hit missiles on that, the whole of Ras Laffan will go up. And that is not what I want to see, because I promise you, it won't be good for anybody. And I'm not talking about people in the Gulf. I'm talking a planetary-wide 30 million barrels of oil a day taken off the table, which will not be rebuilt or put back on the table for a minimum of 3 to 5 years, and that is with the whole world coordinating to rebuild it. And the whole of my Gulf, my Persian Gulf, will end up with oil in it. And people need to understand that's a low basin. It's not a deep ocean. So if oil goes into that Persian Gulf, it will stay there forever. And it will just destroy the whole of that region. So I hope
for your
everything...
just to reassure you, mate, the Qataris have just confirmed that the security situation is quite stable after the Iran attack. So that's coming from America, AEFP. We're also seeing Iraq and Kuwait have closed their airspace still. Flights are grounded around the UAE and Bahrain and Qatar. And a couple of airlines, Turkish and Egypt, they are suspending regular flights for the time being. So they haven't given a specific time frame, but they're saying for short to medium term. So it seems like there are subtle, gradual confidence that things are going to settle down now. But just to your point, Hussein, I think this demonstrates that this is not the end of Iran-Israel engagement for sure. It just means the US is going to back away for the time being or something. Did you want to come in on that?
And I hope that people can start to think about Israel and Iran. But the thing is, we can't Israel and Iran stopping, and it continues in Gaza. That cannot be allowed to continue because the people of Gaza deserve not to be murdered. I don't know if you guys heard or not, but yesterday there was a report out of the Harvard data set that said there's 377,000 people missing. And this is not me coming up with the numbers. It's a Harvard data set that has been put in place that 377,000 people are now missing in Gaza. They had a population of 2.25 million. They're at 1.85 million. The people of Gaza do not need this to continue. I hope whatever happens, and if it does, and I don't think it's going to be peace just anytime soon, but if it does, I hope that no matter what happens, that Iran does not stop until the situation in Gaza is sorted out as part of the whole thing. Because those poor people have been suffering a genocide, and it's horrendous what's happening to them. Even till this day today, people are dying of hunger, going to centers to get food, and they're getting killed. They're getting shot by tanks, they're getting shot by drones. What for? End it. Try and treat people like humans.
Hey, just so we're clear, that note from that Harvard report is nowhere mentioned. The 377,000 is nowhere mentioned in the main report. It's derived from a footnote from a map in that report. So let's be clear on what's being said there. There is no 377,000 missing people. It was derived from some type of extrapolation from a footnote from a map in that report.
Justin,
and the population
I'm
was
grateful if you can explain it to me.
2.5.
Justin, just one question for you, mate. The report that you're saying, are you saying that because it's the troop movements between various places that the Israeli Defense Forces
the
and other
report
people...
does not discuss anywhere missing population numbers. It is highly critical of like the IDF distribution sites and everything else. But when you're making the argument that there's 377,000 people that are entirely missing from the population, there's a footnote on, I think it's page 5, that they took a map and they extrapolated, and someone wrote an article about 377,000 missing people. That is nowhere. That number is nowhere mentioned in the actual report.
Okay, but are they moving more than 1.85 million people around Gaza?
I don't know the numbers. I'm pushing back on your assertion.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
The population in Gaza has actually grown. It's weird for a genocidal moment.
So what you guys can go back and forth briefly, but I do want to keep as much on the recent developments, because if we go into Palestine,
no, there's no point, Piotr. I'll leave it. I've said what I've said, and if it's not 377, if it's 300,000, 200,000, 57,000 on its own is enough, because 80% of those 57,000 are men, women, and elderly people. That's it. What did they do?
It's impossible to extract those numbers. It's just ridiculous.
Excuse me, Justin, you are the ridiculous one over here. We're talking about Gaza and not mentioning the occupied Palestine fully, the millions of displaced Palestinians. You're not allowed to debate somebody has a knowledge about the number, the accurate number, and discuss it as
him on
we
the
are
source
not
of
working.
the number.
You're not allowed. You're not.
Okay, guys, I'm not going to go down the Palestinian route, not as much as I don't think it's important. I just don't think it's going to go anywhere at this time. I prefer to try and stick to the topics at hand. James, did you have anything that you've seen since, or Jingle? I know you're waiting, so we'll get you. Tagred, I'll come to you in a second, but I'm sorry. It's also very glitchy. You let me unmute. I thought everyone was unmuted. James, have you got anything? You saying anything else? If not, we'll go to Jingle, who has been waiting for like 20 years at this point. Jingle, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Peter. Earlier the points about the oil exports coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. I just that's when I had my hand up, so I kind of wanted to touch on that, but just briefly because I know we're moving on. If Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, they're screwed because China is not going to let that happen. And they are not going to be a happy customer if Iran decides to keep doing their airstrikes and their proxy wars and also close off 21% of Chinese oil production. Honestly, I mean, I try to be very neutral in this whole conflict, and I try to just look at everything objectively based on my knowledge and what I've experienced. But what I'm seeing is that Iran is close to being finished. I think the only hedge they have right now is their oil exports in the Strait of Hormuz and, the theocracy set up.
Sorry, mate, do you mind if I just quickly share something very interesting here? The US Department of State has released footage and images showing 7B-2A Spirit long-range stealth bombers with the 509th bomb wing armed with the 2 GBUs. This comes from their Operation Midnight Hammer. Our additional documentation also shows the return of the bombers. So we're actually seeing the first, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, first video footage of the bombers on the way out to carry out their strikes yesterday. So that's quite interesting. But I'll pass back to you, Jingle.
Thank you. And I don't think that the U.S. nor Trump, they don't just want to not get involved any further. They don't need to. I think Iran making it very clear that they have no problem attacking the GCC states and attacking American air bases in the Muslim world, in the Persian Gulf. What's next? Closing the Strait of Hormuz? Because what I'm seeing is Iran keeps shooting themselves in the foot. And somebody brought up Gaza earlier, but I'm sorry, but last week we saw Iran strike northeast Gaza. So everybody is complicit in this humanitarian crisis, including Iran. So I'm kind of just befuddled at, how Iran is the savior of Gaza because they bombed Gaza as well. So let's not act like Iran is some golden shining city on the hill, because they're not. I believe that regime change is right around the corner.
Well, Zingo, if I can ask you on that point.
Yes.
There's a lot of hysteria, including myself. I get carried away in the heat of the moment with what we've seen in the past 2 hours. But, when you say they're sort of done or they're on their end, are they though? Haname is still around. The IGC is still a potent military force in its own right. There's still ground troops around. So we can disable infrastructure and weaken the regime, but unless there's a full-scale military operation on the ground, how can you really see a regime change or collapse being effectively achieved? Because it's hard to do with only an aerial campaign, right?
No, that's a great question, Peter. Well, we know that there is far left, quote unquote, movements on the ground in Iran. I believe the figure was 70%. If somebody is an expert on Iran, please chime in with the actual statistic. Most of Iran's population is 25 or younger. So, I think that the country is ripe for regime change. I'm not calling for it either way. I'm just saying the timing is right for it. And from the Iranians that I've spoken to, they want it. They want to see the fall of the Ayatollah. And even if it means getting a Shah back into power, Reza Pahlavi, they will take that over the theocracy that's been there since 1979. Sorry, I wanted to touch further on the IRGC on the ground and their military presence because China gives them so much funding for signals intelligence, ballistic missile research, oil exports. China is their main backer. Everybody wants to say Russia, but China is their main backer because China is getting 21% of their oil from Iran. China will not let this go on any further if they decide to close the Strait of Hormuz, which I think they're right on the verge of doing. And once that happens, China is not going to fund them to be able to sustain this war. And you're going to have the Gulf states, Israel, and the U.S. will probably continue to carry out airstrikes just for air dominance and superiority. And, this will not last long for Iran. And I honestly believe that, we're going to see a Saddam Hussein / Gaddafi-like video popping up on X in the next 6 months to a year of the Ayatollah being pulled out of a hole that just got bombed by B-21s. So,
well, that's if itself
Can I reply
be
to him?
kept to that. The guy's like 86. Personally, I do disagree with you. I just don't find it. Not saying that the country can't undergo change or regime change, but the capacity for nation state building and long-term committed ground wars is over. That's why the destabilization of Libya through the airstrikes and NATO's engagement in the 2011s was such a lambasted moment, because it was the Americans, the West, trying to get rid of Gaddafi, and then that lead to a civil war in Libya for 10 plus years, which was anything if not worse. And we lost oil contributions from the economy. So I just don't see how a country as big as Iran, again, I'm not trying to be provocative here, but I find it difficult to see how it can be as smooth as that unless you get some kind of group like we saw in Syria who come from within. But as far as I can tell, there's no clear opposition. The biggest opponents to the Islamic Republic are the diaspora, who are very supportive of, some of them are idealistically supportive of the monarchy. And I don't know whether that's a viable alternative. Hussein, I'm sure you have your own thoughts, so I'll pass it to you, and then we'll get your thoughts again, Zingle.
I just want to say to Quinn, mate, you've got absolutely no clue about the situation in Iran with those people who are young. I've said this a few times, and I'm going to repeat it one more time for those that have not heard it. When you attacked Iran, you turned everyone into an Iranian national. Every Iranian that lives in Iran wants to smash the living daylights out of things because you've attacked the country. Anyone who's sitting there talking about regime change will get hung up. We'll get, and I mean literally, we'll get hung up. And all you've got to do, but you can't do it because you're not an Iranian. But I am an Iranian, and I can understand Iranian, and I'm on TikTok, I'm on social media. And all these young people you see in Iran doing these TikToks, and it's not something where they're getting paid. They're like young kids with their hair out that are saying, look, I don't like the government, but you know what? I don't like those people telling us what we should do in our country. And when they look at those people with Israeli flags, which is what Reza Pahlavi is, they look at him the same way as they look at Israelis. The only Iranians that would consider having someone like Reza Pahlavi is my mother's generation of 79, 80-year-old people. And they're not the young people. The young people do not want to see, let's say, an Islamic Republic. I agree with you. They had a chance through the Reformist Party to see that happen. But Israel destroyed that by doing what? Going to attack Iran. To do what? To bring America into the war because they can't handle it on their own. And at the end of the day, that's where we are today. Please, I beg of you, you're sitting in an echo chamber of, there's going to be a regime change, dude. I know, because I'm speaking to some Iranians in Hollywood or Los Angeles or New York. Mate, they're all out of fucking touch. The only people that matter are the people who live in Iran, mate. Forget all this other nonsense talking to your friends who were Iranians. If they were Iranians, they'd be inside the country. I'm not in my country because I've broken my back. Otherwise, I'd be in Iran right now, doing whatever I could for my country. And that attitude is the same for millions of people in the diaspora, and it's a small proportion of people who support the Shah. And I would have supported something like him, but as soon as I saw the Israeli flag wrapped around his neck, I saw the kippah, and at the Wailing Wall, I'm like, and what is this? Is this another president that's going to try and become Israel's president for the United States? That's the mental attitude of people. People are sick and tired of it, and we don't. And you know, I'm trying to stress it to the whole room. The Iranian people are 100% behind this government at the moment. I'm not saying tomorrow is going to be the same, but while this war is going on, while there is a missile being fired at us,
Can I ask you,
Iranians have got
let me
their
challenge
arms
you on that.
together.
There are millions, apparently, lots of Iranians are apparently fleeing. Or I've had some colleagues of mine who live in Azerbaijan telling me that a lot of Iranians are arriving at the border in the north.
Not 90, listen to me, but Piotr, there are people that have left Tehran because they're worried. My own, my mum basically, and my aunt, my mum is here in London with me, but my aunt, she's been moved from Tehran to Karaj. Why? Because Tehran could potentially become something. In fact, it was when Donald Trump says, empty Tehran. A lot of my family left, which is why when you see Arya Amir, who is doing videos, there's no traffic in Tehran right now. You know why? Because people have left Tehran. But, you know, people are not going to leave because they're worried about anything other than getting bombed. And the good thing is that the Israelis are not hitting civilian targets, which is a good thing, because I don't want to see the blood of my people. And I'm hoping exactly the same thing is being done towards Israel as well. We're not bombing them, we're bombing their military assets everywhere. So, and it has to stay that way, because the bloodbath of millions of people getting bombed and killed and this, that, and the other.
So Hussein, one of the tweets that I've been seeing trending on X in recent hours even is Iran's third option. Is that about trying to target the Strait of Hormuz, or is there something else there? Is that about the government being changed? What does that mean?
I don't know what that is, but what I can tell you is this, and maybe Anas will tell you as well, because I think he's an oil expert as well. The critical problem for the whole world is oil is flammable, gas is flammable, because oil fields do not have enough protection from, you know, if Tel Aviv, the heart of Israel, is unable to stop these missiles, no oil field can do that. That is the biggest threat to humanity, because it will literally put us back 10 to 15 years, and America will turn into the Hunger Games with people with guns turned into tribal groups, and it will be the same all over the world. And it will be very hard for us as humanity to come back from that. That's what we need to avoid. That's what needs to be put into into a box, lock it and say, let's get people talking and let's end this problem. Because any wrong escalation going in the wrong way could potentially destroy the oil civilization that we enjoy in 2025, and we'll revisit it in 2045 when I'm dead.
Mate, thank you for that. Yeah, Zingle, we're going to go to you, and I do want to acknowledge we've got a lot of hands in the space. Also, do be sure, guys, to retweet the space and drop your comments below. Engage with some of the posts in the nest. I've posted some of my things. Sitrep's got some of his stuff up there. One of the scenarios that I actually said could happen was this strike on US assets in the Gulf. So, you know, the 5 worst case scenarios we've seen, effectively 2 of them come true, the US getting involved and these strikes. The third one that I'm also talking about is what Hussein has said, which is the Strait of Hormuz blockade possible? So check out any of those things and follow any speakers you resonate with. But yeah, Zingle, we'll go to you. Jewel, I want to introduce you, and then Jess and John.
Yeah, so I'm honestly not sure who was speaking. I think it was Hussein. It just said listener for him, but
yes, it was Hussein.
Okay. I think 2 things can certainly be true at the same time, and also I protect sources and methods, but you know, the Iranians that I've spoken to fled to Turkey in early June, or even as early as the end of last year. But anyways, they're not in Hollywood. They're not, you know, in Glendale, California, driving their Rolls Royce. But yeah, I think that whether you like it or not, the West has regime change in the cards for Iran. And I get it, 92 million people in Iran, that's great. If 100% of the people are on board with the Ayatollah, regime change is still going to be foisted upon the Middle East. I mean, this has been true since the 1960s, when the West installed the Shah. And the White Revolution, in the early 70s in Iran, that was all a Western ideal. And you can even go back to 1944, when the Shah visited Harry Truman and said how much he loved our Western infrastructure and how he wanted the same vision for Iran. I don't think that a 45-year theocratic regime is going to be any hedge against the West, especially when we saw what just happened at Fordo. I am sympathetic to your point. I think it's based in fact and somewhat objectivity, but I think two things can be true at the same time, Hussein. The plight of the Iranian people and the regime, I don't think stand a chance against the West and, our new formed allies in the GCC. So, especially when we have air superiority and the Chinese aren't going to back Iran for a long-term conflict, especially if it affects their oil exports. But I yield back.
Can I just ask
All right,
you
thanks for that, mate.
Piotr, just want to ask him a question if he can reply to me. Is he actually suggesting for 1 minute that the Gulf states will actually get into a hot war with Iran for America and Israel? Is that what you're saying, Quinn?
Okay, so did you not see what Saudi Arabia said 2 weeks ago? They said that they will allow Israel to use their airspace to strike down Iranian missiles. I think that,
do you think that's the same as Air Force, the Royal Saudi Air Force and the Qatari Air Force actually launching attacks on Iran? You think that's a possibility?
I think if it protects their oil and money interests, I think absolutely. I think they will look beyond their, your term, echo chambers of what they believe.
Well, that's what you believe, mate. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's opinion-based in fact.
No, it's not opinion-based. Can I please jump in, moderator? It's Joel here. Please let me speak to this. It's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, go ahead, mate. We've not heard from you yet, so go for it.
Thanks for the opportunity. So, credibility source, lived in Iran for 2.5 years, fluent Farsi linguist, learned in government service back in Australia. I was actually on ground during the Green Revolution. One of my jobs was to monitor protests on ground in Tehran and other major cities from 2009 to 2011. With respect, Mr. Zingle, your analysis is not from someone who's actually been in Iran. I'll tell you that right now. You've not spent any time in the country, mate. So with respect, you're clearly a smart guy. You've got a lot of handle of facts and history and so on. The Iranians are not about to see regime change. It's not real. Do you know what the procedure is? 1 million plus ready to die for the regime, state-sponsored, armed.
2 million, Joel. 2 million, not 1 million.
It's grown since I was in town. All right, thanks for that. Thank you for the correction. There is so much infrastructure in place to support the regime. It's not a split down the middle, Sunni Shia Iraq that's been smashed with very heavy Western sanctions for years. It's not a tribal Afghanistan. And even then you could argue that those campaigns didn't really work. The reality is Iran is about to see regime change. Cold has been parroted since I first came to the Middle East in 2004, back in army days. I'm so sick of hearing it. It does not reflect the reality on the ground at all. The people who are very pro-Iran revolution are the liberal arts majors who protest in the nice suburbs of Tehran. As long as it's not raining. Every time it rained, the protest stopped. So it shows you their commitment levels. It's nonsense. And there is so much infrastructure in place. Even if there was local support, which there isn't, to Hussein's point, there is so much infrastructure in place. There's examples, and I'm sure Hussein can correct me on the specifics here. I think it was Mashhad was having an uprising in the 80s, and the leader at the time was about to scramble his own jets to bomb his own people. The regime is not going to end up getting sodomized in the street like Gaddafi. They've seen what happened, and they've, since 2011 and the Arab Spring, put in even more effort and even more infrastructure into both garnering local support, having an incredibly powerful state police. Well, one thing, I don't want to ramble too much, but prior to
Sorry, Joel, if I could just share some news. In addition, we shared this earlier, the Israeli strikes in Tehran now releasing reports of the Israeli airstrike in Shiraz as well. Sorry, continue.
Makes sense. There's infrastructure that's attracted to them. So a lot of people don't realize the history in Iran. Before, when the Shah was in power, the Savak, the secret police, was one of the most heavily, in terms of capability, like heavy-handed and capable secret police in the world. 1 in 3 people were either employed by the secret police under the Shah or reporting into the secret police, and they were trained by the Israelis and, the usual suspects. And that infrastructure and that culture of keeping an eye on your neighbor and everyone informing on everyone. There's a saying in Farsi, death is good for neighbors. Everyone's watching everyone else and snitching on each other. And those who've actually lived in Iran will speak to this. The ability to pick out pockets of dissent and squash them that the Iranian regime has. And I'm not an Iran apologist, not in any way, but I've lived there. There is no way we're seeing a regime change anytime soon. And I cannot listen to people who've never even been to the country prattle on with that old line. It's nonsense. Sorry, I just need to
So Joel, let me ask you then, with your experience, great to have you actually on stage. Love to have you back in the future.
Thanks,
what's your sense of the Islamic Republic sort of mindset at the moment? Like, I've just posted in the nest for anyone who's interested a video I recorded. To be fair, a couple of days ago, so before the US, I released it as the US struck the. But if people are interested, it's in the nest. But I'm sort of emphasising in that one that the situation for the Islamic Republic really isn't good. They're very good at, I think, putting on a brave face, but in reality, they are with their back against the wall, and this is the worst case that they could be in. Like, their proxy network is gone, their ability to leverage plausible deniability is gone. Russia's not coming to their aid. China is not going to do anything. What do you think they have in their toolkit to really try to minimise the risks to them?
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree. This is not an ideal place, and they would be more concerned than we've seen in the recent future. However, going from that scenario to regime change is very different. They have a few things on their side. One, geography. Militarily, if we have any veterans in the chat, trying to put boots on ground in Iran is a mess. It's a different equation to anything any superpowers tried to tackle over the recent, I'd say, decades. So yes, they're concerned, but the other thing is they don't really need to be loved at home, again, because of the infrastructure they have in place to squash dissent. And the idea that just by dropping missiles you're going to bring about regime change, for those who've been involved in the regime change business, it requires a bit more than that. Yes, there are boots on ground. I mean, I don't want to get too much into specifics, but yes, Mossad have demonstrated an incredible capability both in terms of human and covert ops on the ground. But the idea that there's somehow regime change just because Iran's in trouble and has lost its Shia arc across Syria and into Lebanon, just because Hezbollah have holes in their pockets because of the whole Pages thing, they don't need to be loved. They have the infrastructure by force, and they can bring in. I mean, I remember in 2009 there were people who were playing the role of essentially riot police who were not Iranians. They'd been brought in from Lebanon and other countries, and they were so brutal. Like the appetite for the Iranian regime to absolutely punish its own people to squash dissent is something few people understand. So we are still, yes, Iran's worse than it has been in terms of its geopolitical standing and so on, but in terms of their ability to squash an uprising, it's still very much intact. The infrastructure's there.
Yeah, I was going to say, to my mind, I mean, we can talk about regime change or collapse. I personally think it's a little bit ridiculous. The propensity for Iran to be, resilient, much like the Russians and their economy and stuff, is there, right? They've got to be used to being a pariah state, designated as state sponsor of terrorism, being effectively targeted for decades, and so they've built up this capacity to deal with it. I don't think they ever expected it to come to the fray like this, but yeah, I think it's pretty insane. My last question for you.
Can I jump in, Peter, for him?
I one last quick question to Joel, because I haven't heard him before.
We're all waiting in line as well.
Yeah, Joel.
I had my hand up for like an hour. Thanks, Joe.
You came in after me, Yehuda.
Okay, you guys go into the guys. Go into the. You go and have your spat in the messages.
I can't. So we're all adults. Let's act like adults. We're getting there. Let's get it through. Joe, go ahead.
I wanted to. Oh, okay, never mind. All right, Joe, go ahead.
Peter, if you want to, go ahead. Ask him. I'll wait.
No, my very last question was for you, Joel. Just what do you think about the Iranians and their short to medium strategic play now? Do you think they're going to focus on Israel and breathe a sigh of relief the US are out, or how do you think are they going to get the Houthis involved? Are they going to play the Strait of Hormuz? Like, what's to come in your mind?
I think Houthis are pretty weak. I was actually on the ground when the war started. I saw the first shots of the Yemen war with my own eyes, so I've got a bit of a read on the Houthis as well. I don't think they're any sort of have much geopolitical weight to bring into this. I'd say, look, I'm not an expert when it comes to many different things, but I do know the Iranian people. There's a very strong pride. You know, the former Persian Empire. They have to save face, and that's what we see here. War is theatre. This was a symbolic gesture which was given forward notice. You know, we're going to bomb this empty base. This was definitely going to happen in terms of a saving face. I thought they were just going to hit US bases in Iraq. I think it might have some consequences they perhaps didn't really think through, hitting the GCC. They might, you know, there's a lot of Iranian money throughout places like the UAE and support, and a lot of Iranians living here. Like I was surprised to see the strike on the GCC. I don't think that'll play out too well for them long term. I just thought they were going to hit Iraq. So they had to save face. They've done that. Now they can go and tell their local populace, look, we stood up to Shaitan Bazorg, you know, the great evil as they refer to the West. But this was simply a symbolic saving face gesture. They don't want continued exchanges, and they don't actually have the appetite to bring about any material or, in terms of loss of life, damage to any of the Gulf states. So I think this is theatre, would be my summary. I hope I've answered your question.
آفرین پسر گلم.
Merci de
All right, guys. Thanks a lot, Jill. We'll come back to you if you're still around. Yehuda, I know you're whinging, so we'll go to you, Joe. You're whinging as well.
You can go ahead.
Like, seriously, guys, don't do that again. I'm trying to introduce a new speaker, and he made me look like an idiot. So thank you so much. Anyway.
All right. So I think it's important we keep talking about Iran's capabilities. And as the gentleman who just spoke rightfully said, they can repress the regime. The regime can be as repressive as they want, more than we even know. 100% agree. Do I think the Shah is going to ride in on a white horse? I think that's not possible. But he mentioned about the regime's apparatus, the apparatus. I think you need to revisit that in a month or two. How much of that will be there? Right now, we're looking at the Israelis destroy even like list down like very small towns. You're seeing. I can't even remember the name of one of them. The Basiji headquarters, command and control centers. I think they're doing that because if there was an appetite, not for the Shah, but rather, you know, other forces inside, the Israelis are going to try to set the conditions for that. I don't think you can make regime change, as you know, and I think people keep talking about how strong Iran is in terms of number. No one's ever even said there's going to be a land force battle with Iran. No one's saying that. Yes, we've heard special forces have been at Fordo and other places, but that's very, very specific. Those are special forces operations for a reason. So can the degradation of the regime's ability to repress its people, can that be destroyed by air, Piotr? I would say it's possible. I don't think it's ever been done. But you could say what the Israelis did over Syria for 10 years, destroying its capability to repress its people, having Nasrallah die, Hezbollah as a bully with a cudgel not be able to prop up the regime. It fell. But obviously we had Giuliani, and I would argue he didn't come from the inside. He had a lot of help from Turkey, right? So does Iran have that? No, you're right. There is no force supporting a regime change element. However, if the Israelis walk away from this with a nuclear program destroyed and ballistic missile capability severely damaged, I think they're going to chalk that up as a win, and the chips will fall where they may in Iran. The only people that can make that decision are the Iranian people. That's what I wanted to say. I was hoping, your friend's still there. I think we need to not take for granted what the IRGC will have in its toolbox in a month when the end state is met, when the Israelis have, achieved the objective set out in that operation that they've executed on the 12th or 14th of June. Thank you.
Brother, bombing the Basij headquarters will just make them more motivated. They're just going to be more fired up. It doesn't change this is about ideology. Dropping bombs on things doesn't change people's ideologies. I've seen those guys. They are legitimately ready to die for their regime.
I have to, Jewel, and I'll tell you something, though. Here's the difference. You also said another good point. How many people in Iran are 18 to 40? All of those people have been fed a diet. Now, you have to admit, people are people. They've been fed a diet for 20 years. They are supremely powerful. They are able to do this. They're able to do that. There's a huge morale issue when you see your regime not be able to do a thing that they said they could always do. And I think if you've ever planned operations, you have the physical plane, you have the psychological plane. Usually psychological plane for junior officers and staff college is a throwaway thing. Yeah, enemy morale, average, medium. We can't, and I don't know the answer, but we can't dismiss the effects of what Israel has done to Iran's capabilities. We can't dismiss what that will lead to. I think, just to be fair.
Brother, you're saying you don't know the level of morale for fanatic, heavily religious, ready to die besieged force.
I'm not talking about
not,
now.
not only that,
Joel, later.
Can I just jump in very quickly as well? Just want to add one other thing. The difference as well between Iran and Syria, just so we're clear, is 65% of Iranians are Persian, 22% of it are Azeris, Turks, okay? And the rest, which are the Kurds, is 8 or 9%, the Baluch and the Arabs and everything else. It's not the same, what's it called? Kind of numbers where you're expecting people to attack each other.
For a surprise here, because it turns out that Iran wasn't bombed in the way that Trump told us, but it appears that Trump has a strategic purpose for carrying out this theater. And you're going to find out about that here. So welcome to Brighteon Broadcast News for Monday, June 23rd, 2025. I'm Mike Adams. Thank you for joining me today. If you missed my special coverage yesterday, and then you should definitely go back and check that out. Brighteon Broadcast News. It's on brighteon.com, and I've posted it on Telegram and brighteon.social, everywhere else, etc. It basically just goes over the facts of what we were told happened by Trump and Rubio and others. And then I began to question yesterday whether that's what really happened at all. And it said that we really need to see satellite imagery of the morning after the bombing. And now we have that. We have it now. So, in fact, I want to show you that image right now. This is the image from Maxar satellite. And as you can see, it's dated. It's the Iran U.S. airstrike aftermath on the Fordo nuclear facility. Image taken June 22nd, which was Sunday. And if you look sort of in the center of this image, a little bit above center, those are the tunnel entrances into the underground complex. And because this is built on a mountain here, right, so you can't really see the z-axis of the mountain, how much it rises up. But the tunnels are on the side of the mountain, near the base of the mountain. And as you go into the mountain, of course, the amount of earth on top of you gets larger and larger and larger because the mountain is taller, obviously, as you go, closer to the center of it, inside of it. So it turns out that the mountain, I'm hearing different numbers, but I'm just going to say it's at least 100 meters thick, where the centrifuge equipment is located in the Fordo facility. We've also learned that Fordo was largely evacuated because Iran was given a heads up by the United States that this attack was coming and that they were going to hit the nuclear facilities. And Iran had plenty of time to move the enriched fuel out of these facilities, which it did. And there are other images on other days. I don't even think I'm going to bother to show them to you, but take my word, they're out there. Of June 20th and 21st, lots of trucks lined up outside the entrance to the facility. Big rigs that were clearly carrying things out of the facility. They were anticipating the bombing. Now, back to the map here, or the satellite image from Maxar. The one large building that you see, sort of center left, that's an outdoor building that houses, for example, air conditioning equipment and things like that. That wasn't even hit because it's easy to replace. That's not a key part of the facility. The strikes that took place achieved what you can see on the right side of this image, which is, it's labeled likely 3 munition entry holes. You see them up top and you see 3 more holes at the bottom. So what this indicates is that there were 6 munitions that hit this target. So when Trump says, we targeted Fordo and we successfully struck it, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. They did successfully strike it. Just as if I take an AR-15 rifle and I pick out a piece of dirt in the distance and I shoot the dirt, I can say I successfully struck my intended target. Okay, did the rifle round do anything to the dirt? Nope, not really, just made a little crater, which is exactly what happened here. So what you are looking at with the Fordo nuclear power facility is 6 multi-million-dollar holes in the desert. So nobody can spend more money on making holes in the desert than the United States. Now, we were told that 6 bunker busters were dropped on this facility, but if you examine these images, you'll note that all 6 struck in different places. And in order for bunker busters to really penetrate deeply, they have to go into the same crater over and over and over again, kind of, sort of tunneling down from the surface. And if they had succeeded in doing that, you would see a big chunk of the mountain missing. You would see landslides. You would see massive craters, not these relatively small craters. These, I don't know, they look like they might be 8 to 10 meters across based on a guess of the width of the roads and so on. We can take a pretty accurate guess of the diameter of these. They don't look that big. In addition, the radial blast marks from these munitions, they don't look that big either. And I will say for the record, I will absolutely defer my final conclusion on this to other weapons experts who have far more experience than I do in looking at military blast images, let's say. And those would be people like Ted Postel, Scott Ritter, maybe Colonel Douglas McGregor, I'm sure would have a lot more information than I do on this. Maybe Tony Schaefer, others. But my initial impression as just, a high IQ person who understands the laws of physics is that these were not bunker buster weapons. That we did not drop bunker buster weapons on this mountain, and it looks like what was actually dropped were something like maybe 1,000-pound bombs or 2,000-pound bombs. Now, I do believe that the B-2 stealth bombers flew in there and dropped this. I'm not dismissing that, although there's no way for us to know for sure. But let's say they did fly in there and they dropped these bombs. They would have hit the mountain because it's kind of hard to miss. It's a giant mountain, so yeah, you can hit it. They didn't hit it in the same spot, but they created a big theatrical, a big boom, big fireball, big explosion. They set some of the grass on fire, which is something that we actually saw in the remote viewing experiment that I've been running. You saw the grass on fire. And the intended purpose of this appears to be what I'm calling a TFZ, Theater for Zionists. Theater for Zionists. So I put out a detailed post on this, and I want to point out a couple of things before I read that post for you. First, remember that Trump announced that we're done. And I think it was J.D. Vance who said, we're not at war with Iran, we're at war with Iran's nuclear program, which is a weird thing to say. But then Trump had announced already previous to that we, quote, totally obliterated Iran's nuclear program. And to that, I say, well, awesome, does that mean we're done? Does that mean we're out of the war now? Does that mean that we will not be involved any longer in this war? Because if that's the case, then Trump has actually pulled off a real-world 5D chess move, and I've even mocked that concept before, but think about it. If this is his intention, if he sticks with this, he has managed to pull the U.S. out of the war And he's managed to appease the Zionists for their bloodthirsty demand for violence. He dropped bombs. Clearly, he dropped some kind of bombs. Created big clouds, big dust, big booms. Big, Fox News waved the American flag. Hoorah! America, right? F yeah. And so he got all that going. And all the boomers who watch Fox News and they're all cheering, for their fairy tale. They think that the whole nuclear program has been destroyed and the Zionists are all super happy right now. But Trump didn't actually do any level of damage that would result in Iran retaliating against America. Not really. I mean, yeah, you blow up some of the entrances, you move some dirt around, you make a lot of noise. So, you set some grass on fire. So what? That doesn't change anything. I mean, it doesn't degrade Iran's nuclear program, that's for sure. But it does allow Trump to say to the Zionists, I went to war for you. I did what you wanted. I destroyed Iran's nuclear program. And America is done now. We've done our job. The rest is up to you. So maybe I'm naive and I'm open to that possibility on this, but I'm going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt for the moment, unless contradictory information surfaces. And I'm going to say that
No, I'm not saying you're lying, but people misconstrue war games because here's the problem you're running into, Joa. Guess where the aircraft carriers are located at? I'll tell you where they're not located at, where the war game happened, in the Persian Gulf. They pulled them out, and they can operate outside of the Persian Gulf, far away from reach from Iranian threats. How they shot them and destroyed them is they used naval suicide bombers on vessels, and that's how they did it. And they simulated it, and they said, no, your aircraft carriers are destroyed for the purposes of this exercise. And people, like, Joa, I've done war games. I've done war games for CENTCOM. I get war games. People, trust me, I've won quote-unquote war games as Op 4. Won them. Doesn't mean jack shit. Doesn't mean anything. So let's not use that as an example, because that's not what's done.
I do want to.
Let me jump in, please.
I want to bring some news here first, guys. Thanks, mate. Just to keep in mind, we haven't actually seen an official press statement from the White House or Pentagon, and it's been 2 hours since the US was attacked by those ballistic missiles, or the base was attacked. We're just checking here as well. Yeah. Just a lot of analysis, also the effectiveness of the Patriot systems that were used against, all these interceptions of the missiles. You've got a bunch of, remnants of the missiles now dotted around Doha and other areas, which are also a bit of a hazard, apparently. But the other thing I just wanted to draw a note to was that exactly 2 years ago, it was the Wagner mutiny on Moscow. There seems to be a thing about June 23rd and major geopolitical events coming down. I know Mary and I were co-hosting on that event, so we're doing it today, me and Sitrad, so it's just a sort of bit of a reminiscence there. But Hussein, you wanted to jump in, and then I do want to get to these hands because they're waiting.
I'll be very quick, and I just want to say, Joe, one thing you did say that I take exception with is that the Iranians hate the Americans and the Iranians hate the Israelis. The Iranians don't hate American people. We hate their government. We hate the fact that this government and every government since 1963 has done nothing but...
Thank you for
fair enough. Yeah, because some people who are listening will think that Iran... I don't hate Americans. I've got American families, and I've got family all over America. LA, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. So yeah, just get that absolutely straight. That's one thing. Second of all, I am not going to go... I'm going to say it one last time. The chances of regime change taking place, and you're trying to compare it to a military regime change in Argentina in comparison to 2 million people who are the families and or the descendants of the martyrs of 1980s war. Who are the Basij people? They don't take their command from anyone other than the supreme leader. There is no other person in the middle of that. So just bear that in
No,
mind.
Hussein, I don't believe regime change is likely. I would agree with the assessment. But what I'm saying is, what I use examples from a historical context, but every country is different. I do believe right now the Islamic Republic, in its current form and how it has levels of security. I'm not disputing, and I have been the first one in this space since the beginning that until today, or really yesterday, and then today, we haven't really seen a shift of Israeli strikes against aspects of the internal regime's security apparatus. We have not seen that. And to be honest, I don't think it's nowhere near enough to get there.
Listen to me. Israel's attacks on Iran, okay, whatever you think they're doing, they're not making the Iranians feel like, oh my God, we're in trouble. They're strengthening the attitude against Israel. With every bombing, like for instance, in the first day, they took a building out to kill an IRGC leader. They killed 60 people, of which 20 were kids. All you did was harden the case against Israel. So if you think an air campaign and the Iranians are going to turn against them, that's not going to happen. And also, you've got to bear in mind, there are videos of Tel Aviv and Haifa and this, that, and the other that have been sent back effectively as propaganda of the efficiency of Iranian missile power. That gives them a sense of pride. So where Israelis go, we've got air dominance and we're doing X, Y, and Z, and you guys, or not maybe you, but the Israelis go, we're doing well, we're fucking them up, this, that, and the other. The Iranians have exactly the same propaganda being fed to them. Like, for instance, as you said, the missiles went to Qatar. We attacked America's biggest base they didn't do fuck all, but we attacked them. So it's all about optics, and the optics are not doing any favors for either side, other than hoodwinking them, and not hoodwinking them actually, just to give them hope that we're on the winning side here and we're on the righteous side. Nothing's going to happen. You know, you're not degrading the human spirit of the average Iranian person by attacking with your planes. If anything, you're making it worse. Just in the same way as Iranian missiles attacking Tel Aviv and Haifa are making it worse, because it's making the Iranians feel better. It's making a whole ton of other human beings who've seen the cruelty of Israel feel better. But
when Iran launches missiles towards Israel, first of all, they try to intercept them with American warships in the Persian Gulf. If these missiles leave here, then they try to stop them with American military bases in Iraq. Even if they pass through here, as soon as they reach Jordanian airspace, Jordanian air defense systems and American F-35 jets there try to destroy them, and they are also targeted by American warships in the Red Sea. After avoiding all this, when they approach Israel, British air bases and American warships in the Mediterranean Sea try to destroy them.
Thank you. The first comment is that Christians are minority in Syria, yet when Syria was free about 65 years ago and has a democratic system, the Islamicists in Syria chose a Christian president. So naturally, what Hussein is talking about, and everyone from the area is talking about, even James can testify to that, people have no problem with living next to other people from the same, from kind of a different ethnic group or different religion, etc. It's just things went wrong for the last 50 years simply because of foreign interference and other forces. Anyway, this is not my main comment. Oil prices declined by 7% today. 7%. When we talk about regime change, I'm going to repeat what I said in the previous space. The best way to understand regime change in Iran is really to look at its history. If you look at the last 140 years, what happened? Of course, Iran, it wasn't the same Iran that was today because it was divided. The 5 states next to Turkmenistan basically were completely different states. But the family that ruled Persia at that time, assassination was very common. So the change of regime at that time was people getting assassinated, and then the son or the brother or the nephew will take over. And then in 1921, the father of the Shah, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, who was the first Shah in modern history, he was like a military officer who jumped on the ruler, killed him, and took over. So the first instances, and this instance basically shows that the regime change was literally domestic. But later on, the Shah cooperated with the Germans, and the Germans were making projects in Iran, and the Soviets were afraid that the railroads that being built will be used by the Germans basically to attack the Soviets from the Gulf.
وأن القوات المسلحة القطرية على أهبة الاستعداد دائما للتعامل مع أي خطر. نصح المصدر المواطنين والمقيمين بأخذ التوجيهات وآخر التطورات من المصادر الرسمية. هذا وأعرب الدكتور ماجد بن محمد الأنصاري مستشار رئيس مجلس الوزراء المتحدث الرسمي لوزارة الخارجية عن إدانة دولة قطر الشديدة للهجوم الذي استهدف قاعدة العديد الجوية من قبل الحرس الثوري الإيراني، واعتبره انتهاكا صارخا لسيادة دولة قطر ومجالها الجوي وللقانون الدولي وميثاق الأمم المتحدة، مؤكدا أن دولة قطر تحتفظ بحق الرد المباشر بما يتناسب مع شكل وحجم هذا الاعتداء السافر وبما يتوافق مع القانون الدولي. وأكد الدكتور الأنصاري في تصريح لوكالة الأنباء القطرية قنا أن الدفاعات الجوية القطرية أحبطت الهجوم وتصدت للصواريخ الإيرانية بنجاح. وأكد مستشار رئيس مجلس الوزراء المتحدث الرسمي لوزارة الخارجية أن استمرار مثل هذه الأعمال العسكرية التصعيدية من شأنه أن يقوض الأمن والاستقرار في المنطقة وجرها إلى نقاط سيكون لها تداعيات كارثية على الأمن والسلم الدوليين، داعيا إلى وقف فوري لكافة الأعمال العسكرية والعودة الجادة إلى
All right, so what the homie on the Iranian television station is saying is there were no deaths from whatever. So everybody's just pretending to placate. I mean, that's starting to look like a very, very working theory. It's very working. My English good. Anyway. I figure if we're going into World War III, we might as well get high as fuck, right? Rewind, 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 rewind.
There are no U.S. bases there. And if we end up with a regime change with a friendly, U.S.-friendly government in Iran, how would Russia react? Because now they have NATO or the U.S. bases literally at the Caspian Sea. We are already at a three-year war right now in Ukraine because the NATO got closer. So will the Russians let the regime collapse because of that? And I've been in spaces where Arab experts, mostly military officers talking, and they said the best outcome for Iran, and I haven't heard this discussion at all in those spaces, so I'm bringing it up. Basically, they are saying that the best outcome for this is for the U.S. and the Gulf states to support a faction of the regime that is the most moderate and will get rid of the idea of supporting the revolution. I know that Iranians who live in the United States and live in the West, they look at the regime as one unit. They don't believe there is moderate and not moderate. But those guys, basically, the proposal is we need to keep the sanctity of the whole system together. And the only way to keep it is to support one faction against all others and move on. Back to you.
In regards to the point that Anand was saying, exactly that's what most of the people are talking about internally and externally, some people even on the ground. I had a discussion with a couple of people from Iran and some Arabs, the entire idea is that someone internally will come change the system. Maybe have different people, but the bit further idea is they will push for constitutional change that will separate a bit the religious figures and the religious ideology that is the exploitation, as Nasser is the exploitation of the Shia axis and the Iranian axis in general. They would detach it from the government and allow the government to act on its own as an entity without the religious leadership. So that's a bit what we said. I wanted to talk about this and just wanted to say
No, not at all, mate. Absolutely. I'm still processing the IAEA. My background is about United Nations, all that sort of stuff. I do have colleagues with them in different parts of the field in Europe, and I think that's pretty.
Did you expect anything different though, Piotr?
Well, look, I've just made a tweet on that. Hang on, let me just read you what I've written. What this would mean, it would mean no more inspections, no more camera installations, no more effective reporting to the IAEA. This is a huge step back, or would be. It has to get through Parliament first, but it would destroy any chance of a diplomatic solution. At the moment, the Europeans are trying very hard to ensure that there is still a diplomatic door down. Even the United States or Trump seems to not want to continue military engagement, which indicates to me, a desire to engage diplomatically. I'm being particular in my words, right? But if Iran is deciding to do that, then that's basically the end of that, because they are walking away from the one mechanism or set of mechanisms that can ensure that. And as I asked at the beginning of this marathon and chaotic phase, was is Iran, how much of this enriched uranium is actually out there and unaccounted for? It's quite concerning. It's one of the things I don't think enough stuff is being talked about. Basically, if they do that, they're effectively showing their minds is made up. They're not interested in negotiating anymore, whilst they don't want to engage with the US on the military footing necessarily, neither do they want to engage with them diplomatically either.
Shouldn't they have equal treatment? Shouldn't they have equal treatment like Israel that also doesn't comply?
Well, that's a loaded question, Joe, and not really relevant to the original point that I was making. I have my reservations.
It's very relevant.
No, it isn't, because I wasn't talking about Israel's nuclear program. I'm talking about Iran. Whether you like it or not, Israel has nuclear weapons. Iran doesn't. I am more critical. Hang on. I am more critical of Israel than some other people on the stage, and why I've had a lot of hatred from people because they think I'm something anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic. But, technically you could argue that this entire war began because Israel just arbitrarily decided to do this. I don't necessarily disagree with it, because I do think the Islamic Republic is a huge threat. But not Iran. I hate the government, not the people. But I also, I'm critical of Israel's actions when I think so. So in this case, yes, I know the double standards that you're alluding to, but that's sort of a bit of a moot point.
But it goes deeper, Piotr.
Israel has the weapons and Iran doesn't. And I am worried about a dirty bomb appearing by the Islamic Republic, and as I said earlier on, a sort of sum of all fears scenario happening. You know what I mean? So
100%. I agree.
Wait. I don't want to go down this because we do have some of the hands.
Yeah. I don't.
No, I'm not going to talk about Israel at all.
I think we should just. I want to hear from Voice.
Yeah. No, but I will go to Voice. But Joe, Iran, Israel, Russia, Ukraine. Ukraine gave up their nukes for territorial integrity, signed the Belarus memorandum, Russia invaded. Look, Iraq, got it.
But the day it happened, I wrote, Trump just nuked the IAEA. It lost all legitimacy with any country whatsoever, because it no longer protects you as acting with them. And Trump just killed that agency. It gave absolutely zero credibility going forward.
Well, it's actually interesting you said that, because the IAEA, the Secretary General, did release a statement that this is the death of the non-nuclear proliferation treaty. So, time will tell. That is an interesting
I don't know. I mean, just one last comment on
and then we'll go to Voice.
It's very early to tell. We're going to go to Voice. Got a lot of hands. I appreciate that. I don't offer too much commentary as I used to, because I think the point I'm going to make is very simply that, it has to pass the Parliament, right? It's being pushed by the Iranian Security Council or whatever it is called, but the point is it hasn't passed the Parliament. if they don't vote through it, then that's quite a good indication that they are genuinely still interested in pursuing a dialogue. If they do, then I think that's a largely big wrap up, and we will be in a pretty precarious situation. That's all I'll say. Roy, love to hear from you.
Thanks, Peter. So I will just allude a little bit on the regime change thing. James said also in previous spaces that the right term from our perspective to look at it, I think from the United States and Israel, would be not a regime change, but a leadership change. And I fully agree with that statement. I think that the Shia axis in general, and especially the regime in Tehran, this is not a suicidal regime. This is also the first time that we're seeing in this constellation a war between Israel and another sovereign country, and not a non-state actor that is basically a terror organization within a country. I know that the IRGC considers to be a terror organization in many countries, but still we have to look at it. This is the leadership of the country. This is not some rebel organization from within the country. So if you look at the long-term strategic goals of regional peace or Abrahamic Accord or any it's obvious that the regime's aspirations can bomb their if you want, but the aspirations are still there. So I think we all agree here in the panel that this is something that is going to come from inside. But unlike Syria and unlike other places where we're place, I don't think that any of the actors in this entire war, nor Israel nor the United States, are planning to drop by airplane the Reza Pahlavi into the parliament in Iran for him to just take over. But if you look at the targets like the Basij, like the jails, like the headquarters of the IRGC, and all of those, it did show that at least strategically the US and Israel are paving the path for at least allowing the Iranian people the groundwork so they can then take or not take missed opportunity or take the opportunity if they're interested to do so. Now there is a lot of disinformation that was thrown around this space, and I know that it's always the same speakers who come up and just throw fake data and all sorts of bullshit around here. First of all, I don't understand all of you people who claim to be America first and all you talk about is Gaza and Israel. You never talk about America. So that's one red flag for me. And I'm sorry, Joy, you are one of them. None offense. And you can respond to that in a moment. And when you talk about, I mean, the knowledge that you have about this region is so poor. Just the fact that you talk about the Iron Dome shows how little you know. The Iron Dome is not intercepting those Iranian missiles. So, I mean, get your shit right, please. And the second thing is, when we see the Iranian regime targeting Israeli targets, and they are targeting civilian infrastructures. All the pictures that are coming out from Tel Aviv and from Haifa are all residential buildings. We can agree on that, okay? And Hussein is saying, no, the problem is with the Israeli government, but not with the Israeli people. But we are celebrating when we see these pictures. I'm sorry, but this is like extremely contradicting, and it's not even being honest. Khamenei gave the order to hurt civilian infrastructure. They are trying to infiltrate the home front command in order to get people to get out of their shelters and get out of protection areas, just in order to have mass civilian casualties. They have done it with Gaza. They tried to do it with Lebanon. They did it with Syria. And now they're trying to do the same. And I'm not buying this bullshit that every time that Israel is doing some sort of a military action, all the people that are dying are children. I mean, there are not enough children all in this planet that they constantly are the only ones that are dying. And the whole story with the bots, that all the bots on Twitter are tracked all the way to Israel. They are right now mass exposing of accounts who claim to be America first, like Red Pill Media, like American Patriots. They are all coming from Pakistan. This has been exposed. So where are you bringing this deceitful data, and when are you going to be honest with your statement? it's so great to be on this space when you have people that don't agree with each other, but at least they base their arguments on facts and not just some made up story and Israel here, Israel there. I mean, this is just exhausting. Like I'm losing IQ points to listen to this kind of stuff. Sorry, I'm done rambling. I know you guys don't like personal attacks and stuff.
That's all right.
Wasn't my intention.
We'll
But
Joe can respond in a minute. I did just want to give another bit of stuff here. So there is no evidence that any US base other than the Al Udeid one in Qatar was targeted.
Al Udeid.
Al Udeid. Thank you.
Al
mate. Sorry,
Udeid.
Al Udeid. Sorry,
Al
my voice is
Udeid.
also going.
It's generous.
No, I know. I'm very bad at it. I'm defending everybody, regardless of my pronunciation is worse than the
I mean, he's British, guys. Please forgive him.
Yeah, oil prices are down 7% as well, so keep in mind.
The lowest price in 5 years, Piotr. Everybody said that it's gonna jump up if the US will strike the nuclear facilities, and here we are. You had experts on this, that were
Yeah,
claiming
complete opposite. But I did just want to say that Matt had an interesting conversation on. I think he covered that at the time. He's on his YouTube channel. They've got a YouTube channel. It's in the net. I also wanted to give shout out to Sitter for all the work he's doing in real time on his community, like the sort of safe stuff. And I think the guys letting me up the church, they have an accent. I'm not sure. But yeah.
Actually,
anyway,
Piotr, let me. I'm about to share this.
I'll
This
just
is
say good night to you all.
Well, I was just going to say to
thank you
people
very
to
much.
check out. I
Thank you,
just want to make one last
Good night,
point,
guys.
which
God
is
bless.
just to check out the nest, check out the comment, SitRep, check out what he does, support anyone you resonate with, and SitRep, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so actually, this kind of ties a little bit to our previous conversation.
انطباع للسوريين بقلة الأمان وانعدام الأمان، لكن إنه نوصل لهذا المواصيل وهي المواصيل الحقيقة لتكون صادق معي، يعني السكوت عن ما كان يسمى
English, but mostly the Washington Post. But I think it got completely lost because of the strikes. So I just shared on the net. I'll read it. Israeli intelligence is launching a psychological operation targeting senior Iranian military and IRGC commanders, which is designed to cause paranoia, distrust, and fear among the highest echelons of Iran's security apparatus. That could disrupt command and control, as well encourage defections. What the report is, and kind of in the title of it overall is, Israeli intelligence reportedly threatens Iranian commander via phone calls. It is this Israel has transitioned to, I think we kind of know this, not just the physical aspect of strikes, but they are now targeting the senior Iranian officials involved in this, and they want, and I think this is an intent to kind of do something what we've seen in the past, which is, hey, we want to threaten regime change. We want to, and there is probably a component of this that is just disrupting military operations, full stop, right? But it's to cause this paranoia, distrust that can then slowly degrade Iran. I'm not going to talk about its effectiveness, but clearly, we can't just view this from a tactical sense of the immediate aspect right now of, we want to disrupt command and control, but much more broad. And so, boys, just from your perspective, this is right up the alley of what is
all source. I just had my credibility smothered
wait
on
one
here.
second.
Okay, Joe, I promise you, I'll promise you.
No. If someone did it to you, you would not allow that to happen.
Okay, Joe,
But
I'm
he
sorry.
just asked me a question.
I didn't attack anyone on this stage. Voice came up and said that I'm not American because I only talk about Israel. Mind you, only 16% of Americans were behind this attack, wanted this attack, right? So majority of Americans did not want this attack.
Another
Hold on, I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, but you're just lying.
I didn't interrupt you.
Boys, let him go.
So now you can go to the nest. The second post, the thing that Voice just said is fake and doesn't happen. Is right here on the Wall Street Journal. Meta takes down inauthentic accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn due to linked to an Israeli firm. Right? So the lies that she says, and then this woman has the nerve to see kids chopped in half, and then she writes on her feed that it's Bollywood. There's children dead, cut in half, and she says it's Bollywood.
This is disgusting. If you want
I
to try
don't
to
have a
attack my
single
moral
post like
fiber,
that.
if you want, yes, you do, because I called it out and I wrote you and you deleted it, right? And I actually have the
Nah, I
photo.
don't remember this incident.
Of course you
but
don't. You want me
can
to
go
put it
ahead.
up? You want to put it up?
Okay,
Oh, you want to qualify someone's moral fiber?
Right. So, like, I will be honest though. Whenever you do come on stage, it does get more dramatic. Trying to have a coherent conversation. I want to go to, I think, James, because he's got the news probably, and then we haven't heard.
Wait, but
Hold
Secret
on.
asked me a question.
James, do you have news? Yes. Yeah. I'll go to you, boys.
I want to go to
James,
James because he's part of the team. He monitors me.
Yeah, James, do you have news?
But
No,
okay.
I'll let Maya go.
I mean, Citrap asked me a
Yeah, I
question.
want to
I would
talk
like to
about
answer
this
the question.
psychological operation because it's
Yeah.
not getting the attention it deserves because it's been completely drowned out with the Qatari strike. So, voice me your perspective of, because this is right up the alley of Israeli intelligence.
Sorry, Rob, can I go next?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that this time around with the war with Iran, we sort of got prepared for a lot of cognitive warfare that would come from the Iranian regime. We saw it happening throughout this war in many fronts. And I think there is an understanding in the security establishment that we sort of need to reverse engineer it, right? Now, you probably know, Citrap, when you have intelligence on the ground, like the Mossad, for example, you would want to cause some sort of a movement within your object. So sometimes you will spread a false narrative about this, about that, like in the beeper operation. One of the things that were accelerating the beeper operation was publishing the notice that officials in Hezbollah have to replace their regular cell phones because Israel can track them. And then basically the Mossad, through a shell company, sold them those walkie-talkies and those beepers under the claim that only this specific model cannot be monitored by Israel, and this is when they bought masses of them, and we know how the story ended. So it seems like, I'm of course I'm not in the weeds of things, but I mean it would make sense to me that the Mossad would try to cause some sort of a movement of objects, some sort of panic, people replacing this communication, people not replacing the communication because they think it's a psyop. It's like a psyop on a psyop on a psyop to cause some sort of movement and intelligence on the ground, and then leverage that in real time when all the elements of that objective, whatever it is, are aligning in one place. So this is very interesting to see an Israeli security establishment taking something that is originated by the IRGC and sort of reverse engineer it. And I'm guessing that up until the end of this weekend, we're probably going to see a lot of interesting things happening in that front specifically.
There's some breaking news with Piotr and Sitrep. The Washington Post reports that the Mossad has reached out to over 20 senior IRGC commanders in Farsi and said that they've got 12 hours to leave the country or they and their families will be killed. Just part of the psychological operation that Israel's conducting.
But by the way, interesting thing, sorry Yehuda, also there were 2 days ago, there was like a wave of calls for Israeli journalists and Israeli Knesset members that were received also from Iran when they received like death threats and like warnings that they have to leave their house and their family in danger. Maybe this is sort of like the answer to that, so it would make sense.
There's one difference though, Voice. One is a credible threat, the other one isn't.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that one.
Sorry, Rob, they jumped in. My hand's been off for a while.
Go for it.
Thanks. So, I think we can easily deduce that the Trump administration and the Israelis were in full agreement to completely eliminate the Iranians' enrichment capability. And that commitment was probably made by Trump to Israel a while ago during the campaign and possibly to the likes of Marion Adelson. Now, Netanyahu in Israel is on the other hand, wants regime change. In the long term, wants to drag the U.S. into this regime change. Whereas the U.S. has not signed up for it. The Trump administration does not want to pursue regime change and nation building. But here's how I think this will play out in the future. The Trump administration and Iran will most likely stop their attacks on each other going forward, as we've seen some of the indications. The Israelis will continue to bomb Iran and assassinate leadership to weaken Iran for a regime change, a smooth transition into a regime change without, major complications. The reality is that this will lead to more than likely a destabilized Iran and most likely civil war, with some countries potentially coming to Iran's aid, supplying them weapons and other supplies, all of which will lead to a failed state. A failed Iranian state would lead to a rise in militant groups, warlords, terrorist attacks, terrorism groups, rise in drug trafficking, human trafficking, pirating on the Strait of Hormuz, similar to what we saw in the Somalian attacks, all of which will hurt U.S. interests in the region and cause us to get involved with boots on the ground eventually. Now, long story short, and I go back to what I said before, the ultimate objective for Netanyahu is to basically drag the U.S. into another nation-building fiasco.
Okay, Trump just responded. Hold on. Truth Social. I'm just going to read it. I haven't had a chance. Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of the nuclear facility with a very weak response, which we expected, and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were walked down, and one was set free because it was headed into a non-threatening direction. I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. More importantly, they got it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps...
What a troll.
Wait,
What a
perhaps
troll.
Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Thank you for the attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America.
Exactly my point, Cyprod. That's exactly what I just said.
Oh, wait, more. Hold on. I'd like to thank the highly respected Amir Qatar for all that he has done in seeking peace for the region. Regarding the attack today at American base in Qatar, I am pleased to report that in addition to no Americans being killed or wounded, very importantly, there have also been no Qataris killed or wounded. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Piotr, I don't know.
He writes it
Piotr,
like a
were
great...
you? I don't know. You're back. You kind of came in a little bit that you dropped. Are you there, Piotr?
No, he's just here.
What's up, mate? I don't know. I don't know. You had connection issues. I don't know if you missed.
No,
Trump.
I just dropped. I'm back now. I was just looking at some footage of the Patriot missiles. Very incredible stuff.
But
coming
Piotr,
through.
I think you missed Trump's post. I think you completely missed it. I'll send it to you.
I'm caught. Yeah, send it
Yeah, I'll
to
send
me.
it to you.
I'm just breaking here. The UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait have all reopened their airspace completely. But yeah, I did miss much of the. Okay, I'm seeing it here. Iran has officially responded. Right, okay. I'm going to read over that. Let's go, though. We've got so many
Wait,
hands.
but Piotr, I have a question.
Guys, I've been waiting for a bit. Let me go through this and let me comment on Trump's comment, because that's just in line with what I was about to say. I think my mic is open. Okay, we're good.
Well, sick.
So,
We've got world peace
real
until
quick, the IAEA, the whole Iranian parliament threat to withdraw out of the IAEA. Well, it doesn't really matter anymore. Their nuclear program is gone. So it will become relevant a few years from now, maybe a few months from now, when they potentially want to start rapidly rebuilding their program, if that's the direction they want to go at. But for now, there is nothing there. Whatever needs to be inspected is not there to be inspected anymore. Well, it's been 10 days since the beginning of the operation. It might be interesting now, especially with Trump's statement, to do a very rapid tally of what has happened in the past 10 days. Israel attacked Iran, took over their airspace, took out their leadership, their military leadership, destroyed major IRGC establishments, and maintained air superiority over the country. On the other hand, Iran lobbed few missiles at civilian population. Most of those were intercepted, and that's that. On the American front, the United States decided to obliterate the Iranian nuclear program. And we need to put this into perspective. These are not just three random facilities that got hit. Iran has invested everything they have in this program for the past 20, 25 years. Like, this is a big deal for them. I mean, they've gone through sanctions, a plethora of issues, economic, political, and otherwise, to have these facilities. And within minutes, these facilities were gone. What is Iran's response? Those 14 missiles at an empty base that, with permission from the United States. I mean, if people still, I mean, no offense, Joa or Hussein or anybody else who's still here, if you don't see the writing on the wall, I don't know what to tell you at this point. Iran stands alone with no support. Nobody's coming to save Iran. Not even Hezbollah is willing to move right now to support, the country that created Hezbollah in the first place. It's gone. And if I trust anybody with the analysis, it's not only Anas, but the establishment that Anas comes from, the oil market. Look, we're like 6+%. I think we hit 7% down right now. Nobody's taking Iran seriously at this point. This is.
Kazim, I think people need to know that, like what you're saying, you got to keep repeating it. There is no option that Iran has militarily to do a thing.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, Iran.
We keep talking about waiting for the reply.
To put it in a single phrase, Iran fell militarily. That's it. It's gone. Now, whether they want to surrender in a conventional manner or otherwise, that doesn't change the fact that the country fell. Their defense fell in the first 12 hours. And for the past 10 days, they've been trying to cause any problem possible, whether in the media or through lobbing these missiles at the civilian population in Israel, just to distract you from the fact that the country fell. And that's where we are.
Yeah, but to play a bit of not devil's advocate, but like another view, Iran can do the ostrich for 2-3 years and then start rebuilding everything. We've seen it with other groups that are part of the Iranian sphere, and the question is today, what are the objectives? Someone was talking, I think Dr. Strange was talking about regime change and the fact that Israel wants regime change. I don't think Israel in itself wants regime change in the sense of they want to impose it. I believe that, as they did with Lebanon, they care about their security first. So they destroy the security, and then they weaken enough the parties that are in place in order to help the population internally to do a regime change if they want to do a regime change. And they kind of suggest it. They open up the idea to them. If they do it, they do it. If they don't do it, they don't do it.
James, that's the hallmark of regime change. Yeah. That's exactly how you would actually close a regime change.
Yeah, but it's different to how the U.S. used to do it, or how the Russian used to do it, or how other people used to do it, where they actually impose the regime change. Israel does it differently because they don't have the power to do it.
I doubt it, because if you look at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was very similar, where they leveraged existing entities who had grievances against the Taliban, and as well as Shias in Iraq who had grievances against Saddam Hussein, to prop them up.
But they were there. The Israelis are not there.
James, I fully agree with you. We're not in Israel or the United States. It's not going to show up in Tehran with $1 trillion trying to create a new government. That's not going to happen. That's up to the Iranian people right now.
Eventually, the U.S. will have to go in and clean up, because it's going to create a failed state if you allow this to happen. Lastly, I have to jump off. May I just say one more comment?
Let me answer you, and then I'll comment will go to you. In terms of how the regime change, I think the decision not to do those types of regime changes anymore, and the decision not to move forward. They tried it in Egypt back in the day, it did not work. They tried it in Lebanon for 20 years on the ground, pushing people, helping people, going to Beirut. There was prime ministers of Israel sitting in Beirut, and it failed, and it put people against them, and they decided not to do it anymore. The same way the US decided not to do it anymore with the other. The failed regime came from the fact that they were on the ground for so long. I believe that they will just tell the Iranians, do whatever you want, but if you don't change something, in 10 years we might have the similar war. I'll let you go.
And that's what I was saying, that this is gonna, if you do the math, the calculation, what the Israelis are doing is destabilizing the country to a point which will
to the
lead
Iranian
to a
people.
state.
Basically, why would you want to live under?
Before. It's not like a one-off. Whenever you create, just like, for example, Bashar al-Assad, he became so weak he could not control the country, and it became disaster and a civil war for many years. Having said that, I have to jump off.
Keep on talking, because every time you speak, I swear to you, Trump releases a Truth Social. Last one, he just sent. All caps. Congratulations, world. It's time for peace. Dr. Strange, back to you.
Thanks, I'm glad I'm having that effect. Nevertheless, lastly, I have to jump off, but I just want to say one thing. You know, there are a lot of grifters, and I don't want to do any personal attacks, but Deeproot, who's been
to the Iranian people. Basically, why would you want to live under an authoritarian regime like they've had there since 1979? Easier said than done, of course, about, you know, whether or not the people there can effectuate regime change just like they did back in 1979. So really, what are the aims for the White House here?
Effectuate regime change like they did in 79. Maybe I'm stupid, but wasn't that when we installed the Shah? Or maybe they had a revolution that we started in 79. I don't know. I have to look that up, bro.
How does this all play into it, and what do we expect over the next few days? It's a very fluid situation. All that up for discussion here at the White House today, as there are high-level security meetings ongoing in the West Wing.
So, you know, the one thing that we've heard from a lot of folks that we've been in contact with who have contacts in Iran is that in terms of any kind of an organized opposition that would take over in the face of regime change or the wake of regime change, that nobody's had the time to try to organize anything at this point. We do know that the Israelis blew the gates off of the notorious Evin prison, where a lot of political prisoners who might come out to lead some sort of opposition have been housed. We don't know if anybody's managed to escape. So we'll see how that goes in the days ahead. But Jennifer, let's come back to you here, because what we're seeing here in Qatar.
The Anglo-Persian Oil Company. And so what did they do? The British came in with our CIA and they overthrew Mossadegh. And, you know, and the Shah fled the country. Of course, we all know how that goes. So, you know, look, I'm in favor of not getting involved in general in the Middle East, in part because of the unintended consequences of these actions. These people don't know what the hell they're talking about. But I think it's really funny. The anti-Semites have a different version of this. They think that they know how to manage and micromanage Iran's affairs and Israel's affairs better than those respective nations. I would say, hell, let's just keep our hands off of it. The U.S. has done something, and now Trump says we're out, and I believe him, we're going to be out. But it's so funny how hypocritical these guys are. I just wanted to point that out. That's it. Oh, and it's also really funny, by the way, that Hussein, who was here, he can't defend himself, so I'm not going to attack him too much. But my gosh, I mean, he's sitting there in Britain with a British accent, you know,
He was overthrown by the Brits because he talked so much about the Brits.
No, that's not true. He was a Nazi. He was very in love with Hitler. He was kicked out because of his allegiance to Nazi.
Guys, I want to go to some of these hands. I'm going to be a bit more strict on this now. James, unless you've got news, I do want to go to Nobat. So I think he's got a news thing to say. And you guys have stand up for ages. So, Nobat, do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I think there are worse speakers before speaking me. Some of them, I see mostly like to solve this problem, you need to understand Iran. Iran is not a natural state, but it is unnatural because there are so many nations, including Baloch, which I'm from, Balochistan. There's Kurdistan. So to solve this problem, I don't think simple regime change or installing Pahlavi and removing Khamenei would solve these problems. I think we need approach that is long term because this quick solution probably will backfire because nobody accepts. In Iran, nobody accepts the Pahlavi regime because they know their historical, what they did. His father to the Baloch, to the Kurd, they attacked Balochistan. His father attacked Balochistan. Balochistan was not part of Iran before. It was divided. If we go back to history, it was divided in 1839 by British. Then half was occupied by Pakistan in 1948. In 1928, Iran occupied other half, and Kurdistan also a separate nation. It has nothing to do with the Persian. So the problem.
You would come on with this. Just to bring it sort of to the recent developments, right? What do you think the likelihood that independent movements could begin to grow more in Iran? Because we've had debates tonight about the propensity for the Islamic Republic to go to the extreme in getting a nuclear weapon for survival and terrorism. Do you think that, setting that aside, do you think that the Balochistan separatist movement could grow and then we could see a fragmentation in Iran? I personally feel it's a bit too soon, but if you could weave in your response to the developments we've seen tonight and how the Islamic Republic might be feeling, that would be great.
If I can add to your question, Piotr, the leaders of the Balochian movement, so the Sunnis and the leaders of the Kurds, have said that they don't want to go against the natural borders and the natural territorial integrity of Iran. How do you respond to this?
I think there has been a plan that was rolled out even before this attack around more than 6 months ago, which was published in Memory. If you can go to Memory, you will be able to read it. Baloch, Kurd, Al-Ahwaz, they have been fighting for their independence for quite long now. And I think that is the opportunity that Baloch, Kurd, Al-Ahwaz, and other nations should be, considered when there is a regime change or there is a transitional plan in place. I think we have already given our plan, which is already agreed by all those nations, Kurds and Al-Ahwaz, and there is another nation, Lur, as well. But they have agreed on this, how we going to approach this, even before this attack, how we going to throw this regime and put a new transitional council there and devolution. Through that, democratically, we were going to separate our borders peacefully. If this regime going to change or Pahlavi is brought in place, I think there will be a civil war. To avoid that, I think Baloch, Kurd already preparing for that, and Free Balochistan movement is where I'm from. I've been head of information department for 2 years. We have prepared this plan along with the Kurds and with the other nations that are struggling for independence, that have been oppressed, subjugated by this regime and by the previous Pahlavi regime, the Mir
but in terms of what you're saying, you're giving claims from a certain very fringe, small part of the population, including inside of the Baloch and inside of the Kurds, because the leadership, the big leaders that are part of the Kurds movement and the big leaders that are part of the Baloch movement have come out and stated that they don't want to attack the territorial integrity and divide or balkanize the state of Iran.
If you can come with the names, because I know that.
I'll give you
I don't think any Baloch leader or any Kurd leader have said that, because we all want balkanization of Iran, because we have never been part of this. We were oppressed, occupied. We want our independence. So that's what we are working for. Okay, there are maybe smaller factions that have been in favor of.
Imam of the Sunnis, Maki Mosque. Okay? in Zahdan, you know him?
I know him. I know him. I know him, but they also don't want to be part of Iran. I don't think any Baloch want to be part of Iran.
No, not true. He said in a statement. Let's repeat. I'm pushing back on the statement.
But this is not the majority. The majority Baloch nation wants independence from either Pakistan and Iran. We have been struggling for
this. But you asked for names. He gave you.
Harbiar Mari. He is leading this movement from 25 years now.
Abdelhamid Zahi also. He said the same thing. Those are big religious leaders of the Sunni leadership inside of the Balochistan provinces. And the Kurds have the same. I'll find the name too. Those people have talked publicly about not wanting to balkanize and would be more open to a certain model that is similar to, let's say, to a model of a federalization, something similar to what's being done in Syria compared to a balkanization.
I know there are some people, but I don't think they represent the whole Baloch and Balochistan or the whole Kurd and Kurdistan.
Okay, one second, please. Trump thanks Qatar's Amir for what he's done in quote seeking peace for the region. I am seeing, excuse me, more commentary now coming out about, Trump's quotes. Now lots of people wondering whether or not he's actually going to puppet Israel. So that is something that's going to happen now that it's quite quickly. I think sort of Trump wants to actually end the whole thing, not just US involvement, lots of speculation. I have posted in the net interesting conversation with Mario he had with a guest during the war, during the strike, Scott Ritter. If you like his perspective, then you can check that out. Just wanted to reset the space quickly because I think we're having an interesting debate here between James and Nabat about the propensity for self-determination in the Middle East. Iran's obviously a very multi-ethnic, multinational country, and like the Balochis, you also have
it's bracing for some form of retaliation. It appears that has happened. Hearing of strikes in Qatar as well as Iraq. What more do we know?
Right, Anthony, we understand, at least from the Iranian government and from Iranian state TV, that this was a tit-for-tat attack, in that Iran has fired the same number of missiles towards these two countries as the United States used in its attack on nuclear infrastructure over the weekend. We understand from some of the video that's come out that air defense systems throughout Qatar were activated to try and minimize any kind of response here. We also heard from the Qatari government that because they are a host nation, that they feel that this was an attack on a sovereign nation and therefore they have a chance to respond. So we're immediately seeing an opportunity for this to become a far more regional war. It is worth pointing out that in recent days, the United States military moved much of its infrastructure and its assets out of this largest military base in Doha, including some 40 different pieces of aircraft with limited access as well. An effort here to try and keep secure some of the military assets that exist in the area here, allowing for Iran potentially to say, look, we weren't going to cause much damage here, but we were able to respond. This is now going to be something that the White House watches closely. We know Donald Trump was meeting with his national security team through the afternoon. There was also a meeting of defense officials inside the Situation Room, but obviously this is a new escalation here because the United States very clearly said after Israel began its initial attacks here that if an attack was made on an American base, that there would be additional response.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit in terms of what prompted this in the first place, and that is the strikes against Iran from the United States. In terms of the damage at the nuclear facilities, what have we learned?
It's difficult to know. We heard from the president and from allies of the president over the weekend saying that this was an obliteration of Iran's nuclear facilities at these three different sites throughout the country. It was a different assessment coming from the Israelis themselves and from the UN nuclear watchdog that says that there is significant damage. And obviously there's a big difference here between significant damage and obliteration, because significant means that there is an opportunity here for work to possibly continue or for things to be rebuilt. There is also an unknown here, Anthony, as to what happened to the nearly 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium at one of the sites here. There is a concern that because Donald Trump was kind of publicly posting that the threat existed for an attack on social media, the Iranians may have been able to move some of this uranium elsewhere, and if it wasn't impacted, that gives them another leg up in a game, despite the fact that they have been experiencing setbacks. So what we have right now, at least, is a response on the Americans for their response on Iran, and this is going to be a question. The Pentagon over the weekend said that this is not an open-ended attack, but with things now escalating, this is a question of whether or not there will be another page turned here and something else happens.
Okay, we appreciate the update, Reggie. Thank you so much. Reggie Cicchini joins us from Washington. Thanks again, sir.
What they say in 1984, the war isn't meant to be won, it's meant to be continuous, right? So we were looking at that animation of Iranian missiles being intercepted by millions of dollars of Western equipment between Iran and Israel. Just going on all the time. That seems like a good moneymaker for the powers that shouldn't be in the military-industrial complex. What do I know?
History has shown time and time again that we partner and are on good terms with America and perhaps the collective West. And you do see quite a bit of growth, prosperity, and industrialization in your economy. And as far as you could say, Iran as a nation state, it seems, in my opinion at least, and like I said, history backs up my claim that the nation of Iran will likely stay intact, but there will be a geopolitical shift
بين إيران ومختلف الأطراف الدولية، وفي ظل أن قطر كانت دائما تدعو إلى حل الخلافات مع إيران.
Perhaps even, there'll be some U.S. bases in there too. Who knows? But the first order of priority, of course, is eliminating the threat of the IRGC's capabilities in the Middle East, which the U.S. as well will not be directly, you could say, involved unless there's a need for us to go in for more stealth attacks requested by the Israelis. I think the Israelis alone are inflicting pretty heavy damage on, you could say, the Ayatollah's government. And then just one very important nuance that I think people should understand here from strictly the U.S. perspective is the United States is not interested in, you could say, directly advocating for regime change in Iran. If regime change in Iran happens internally, which I don't see the point or purpose in living under a crippled government with sanctions that have done nothing but cripple their entire economy, to be honest with you. Partners like Russia and China that are not really interested in the well-being and interests of Iran as much as you think. Obviously, both Russia and China also have their own ties with Israel, but I may have mentioned earlier that they do not wish to compromise for Iran. So, I think that hopefully organically the people of Iran kind of figure out what they want, and whether it's the Ayatollah or some other government, we'll see. I don't think the Ayatollah's government is sustainable for their people. And then the very last thing is, at the end of the day, from strictly the U.S. perspective, even if there is a crippled Ayatollah and his Islamic theology in power, it's irrelevant to us as long as they're completely crippled of their nuclear program and their ballistic missile program, which both the U.S. and Israel have labeled as non-negotiable things. And to be honest with you, I don't think they have the capacity to enrich uranium once these facilities are fully wiped out, which most of them already have been. The Israelis, I believe, are working on the leftover parts. And, we'll go back to
why is Israel trying to destroy Iran? This is like the big $1 million question, and all you see on the internet is complete bullshit. There is one reason why Israel wants to invade, destroy, and have regime change in Iran. It has nothing to do with the nuclear bomb they've been this close to getting for the last 30 fucking years. No, you know what it is? It's called Iran is one of the 2 or 3 countries left in the world without a Jewish Rothschild central bank that will introduce interest, Jewish usury, which is illegal in the Middle East, and then loan that country its own money at interest until they become debt slaves, like you fools in the United States who want to go make this happen for Israel. And if you fools in the United States don't believe that you're debt slaves to Jewish bankers, well, how much debt are you in again? That's right, over 30 trillion. And who do you own this debt to again? The Federal Reserve, which is about as federal as Federal Express. So who are the private banks that own the Federal Reserve? You know, like JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, you know, the banks who are named after the Jewish people that own them, which own the Federal Reserve that you owe the debt to. So Israel wants to use you, the stupid, fat, dumb Americans, to go and blow up Iran so they can install that pro-Jewish puppet into Iran as the new leader, and he will immediately install the Rothschild Central Bank that will then loan Iran the hundreds of billions, if not trillions, they're going to need to rebuild. And surprise, all the American contractors go in and make hundreds of billions of dollars, and the Jewish bankers now have a new debt slave called Iran. It's really that fucking simple. It is. And why is Israel trying to destroy Iran?
Don't jump in, but I keep hearing a lot of talk, and James, you mentioned something about, Iran to put its head in the sand, survived a couple of years. I don't think so, and I'm going to tell you why. I think Iran they didn't even shoot their shot. They didn't have one, okay? And I'll say this. Hamas, taken out. That I expected. Hezbollah, those capabilities weren't new. They were there. So people in the know understood that. Syria was a little bit of a surprise, and I'll tell you why. Syria was able to maintain, through the clan relationships with the Alawites, a strong control over what's going on. I personally wasn't confident that they were as weak as they were. However, people were making the same mistake with Iran that a lot of us made with other proxies, that magically Iran is really, really super competent in terms of military command and control, but all their proxies weren't. I don't think that's true. I think the artificiality they accuse Israel of having is something that they might have had themselves. And the reason why I say it is because it wasn't even 12 hours. I say 24, 48. We're hearing within 4 hours the Israelis pretty much disabled air defenses in Iran on the west side. Iran, to be clear, has launched about 550 ballistic missiles at Israel, plus drone count I haven't followed. Maybe 10%, 8% got through. They did manage to hit the defense headquarters. It was not a very effective hit, but it did hit. They did hit a part of a refinery in Haifa, and the rest were all civilian buildings. This doesn't show me, when you put your best foot forward, this doesn't show me their competence in doing the things that they say they want to do. The Israelis, on the other hand, have not just hit nuclear facilities before the Americans, but they've hit command and control centers that killed 30 generals in a place they should not have known about. Why am I saying this? It's because I think we have to come to the realization that Iran has, the expression fake it until you make it. They've been faking it and they've not made it, and now they're done. Right? So their military, there is no, unless someone's waiting for some some massive Iranian attack. I know the Israelis said they've been shocked. There were leaks in Israel saying that we expected something like 5,000 civilian deaths because we figured that they hit a couple of apartment buildings in Tel Aviv, and all those have been shot down. So that leads to the next step. What's the end state? I think the Israelis, if I was to read their operations order in 50 years, if I make alive in 50 years, but you know what I mean. I'm going to think that one of their main objectives was, the nuclear facilities, second probably by ballistic missile, and frankly, their launchers. So every time Iran exposes itself and fires missiles at Israel, the Israelis go after it. Now, if one thing no one's been talking about is they talk about the American involvement even before the V2s. One thing people don't realize, every single U.S. satellite focused on Iran, all of that information has been given to Israel. 100%. There is no way the Israelis have that much intelligence. This is a strategic satellite capability that the United States have more so than anyone. So I would argue that if you want to blame the Americans for being involved, it's one thing no one's talking about. It's the ISTAR capability, intelligence, surveillance, targeting acquisition. Go through the list. They've clearly shared all that, and they've said to the Israelis, have at her, right? Because this is a threat to us, and it's a threat to you. So have at her. The question is, how long will the Americans provide that? If Donald Trump has said, "Look, Israel, you've done your thing. They're destroyed. I don't want this to continue," I think the Israelis have to listen to that. But I think the Israelis.
Let me ask you a quick question, because earlier Ocean Defendant put a post which I thought was quite interesting. Well, unsurprising, but also a bit, the Iranians really are, embarrassing, or what an embarrassment to say. Like, militarily, obviously, it was quite embarrassing because they've not exactly done much, despite all these stupid accounts and statements saying that we're going to hell fire at you. But do you not think it's quite an impressive degree of measured escalation or calculated risk? Because they were trying to find the best way that they can say to the Americans, "Look, we've had enough of this shit. We're going to strike your base. We're going to tell you, though," or is it literally just desperation? Do you not have any appreciation for the calculus that the Islamic Republic have? Because they do this often and they seem to get away with it. They still.
Fair enough. No, I got to be honest, Piotr. This isn't me cheerleading for Israel in the United States. I'm confident they do not have the technical capability to deliver on the threats they give. Let's consider the options. Could they have fired at Ali Al Salim Air Base in Kuwait? That has got 14,000 American soldiers. They could have. And I would argue that the results would have been the same. The Americans would have shot them down. They picked an empty, relatively empty area to attack because they don't have the option. I personally believe, had a professor at university who said to me, Iran, for all of its misgivings, is a rational state actor in the sense that the regime wants to stay alive. It wants to stay in power. And I believe that to be true. I actually do. There was a gentleman that came earlier and said, "Oh, they're fanatics, they're fanatics." Yes, to an extent. I think some of the people are fanatics, but I think the leadership clearly wants to stay in power. Now, they could have done what they did with the Americans and told them. I said, "Look, it's for internal consumption." And still on Iranian TV, you'll hear them say, "Yeah, we destroyed this and that, and the Americans are afraid of us, blah, blah, blah." But that's what you can do in a repressive regime, right? Like someone mentioned the Majlis, the parliament. It was you. You said, "Well, there is no Majlis, there's no parliament." It's not like Keir Starmer being curious about if he has to, get his whip to enforce a vote. No, it's whatever the supreme leader wants, right? So it's a different thing. They can say whatever they want to their population, their constituents, and they'll get away with it because it is not the kind of country that you're used to or I'm used to. So it's a win-win in a sense. The Iranians can claim, like I just watched a couple of hours of Iranian generals on TV earlier in the day saying how they've killed 1,000 Israelis, hundreds are under rubble, blah, blah, blah. We've cut off the hand of Trump, blah, blah, blah. But there's no pushback because there's no knowledge, right? And in that sense, it's a good thing because the people aren't going to put pressure on the government to do it because they can't, right? So I think we've confused. I think the only thing that I love all you guys.
That's what Yehuda I was saying when I said they can put the ostrich and put their head on the ground. Like the regime.
Yeah, but sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
As long as the regime is not changed, as long as we've seen it with other actors, as long as they are not destroyed, they will live the hardship of the next 2.5 years. They will suffer internally. They'll try to coexist and try to hold the hands and open up. They are very good negotiators. They are known.
You reminded me, James, of something you said. Here's the thing. Here's why that's not true. So remember when Syria started to fall apart? I think for about a year, I thought, "Oh gosh, Assad's going to meet the same fate as Gaddafi." I honestly thought that. And then he weathered the storm, and I said, "Wow, no, he's pretty strong." But here's the thing. Israel, I know this isn't about Ukraine and Russia, but everyone talks about Russian air defense. Israel, for 10 years, literally did whatever they wanted in Syria. If they found out that the Iranians were shipping a bunch of this or that Katyushas or this and that rocket to Damascus to get on a truck to go through Syria to the Bekaa Valley, the Israelis would strike it because they had every capability. The difference this time with Iran is I don't think Israel will stop. I think whether what happens to Iran, a new leader comes in, they don't really have a regime change, it's kind of like moderate light, and Anas is right, there are moderates in the government who aren't hardcore, whatever. And I think Israel will say, since we control the skies, we will stop them from doing things. Now, they're not going to blow up every motorcyclist, Basiji guy, but they will make sure the big ticket items get hit. Now, what's really important about it is that if Israel does do that and push them down, that could force a regime change. And here's the problem with the regime change. No one knows where those chips are going to fall. So it means and this is scary to me when I think about it for the people of Iran, it means the Israelis have said, and this is the Israelis talking, not me. Israelis have said we are confident they would have 9 to 15 warheads in a very short period of time. So we decided that we're going to destroy that capability. And if it leads to a regime change, which leads to the country imploding and being a failed state, we would rather that than nuclear weapons. So that means that there's no game plan. There is no holy grail here, right? It means that they literally said, yeah, okay, we get it. Iran could turn into an Iraq. Now, another last point I wanted to make. People keep using the word balkanization like it's a good thing. The term is pejorative. The fact that people say I'd want Iran to be balkanized, I don't think anyone worth their salt in geopolitics does not want Iran to be balkanized. It's a lot of people, a lot of capability, very bad, and I really wish we removed that from the vocabulary when we talk about Iran. It would be a horrible thing for the people of Iran. It would lead to a lot of death. But as you said earlier, will Iran be able to weather the storm for 2 years? No, because the Israelis will be operating in a permissive environment over Iran. They will be striking targets. If the Chinese decide to bring something, they will strike it. They don't care. The Israelis have made this. It's been 20 years. And remember, Israel, people say, oh, they just unprovoked attacked Iran. Iran has been attacking Israel through proxies for 40 years. 20 years very, very actively through Hezbollah. Right? When the Israelis withdrew from the buffer zone and abandoned the SLA, the South Lebanese Army, I think that was a bad message. It was like when the Americans left Beirut after 82 or 83, sorry. I think it sent a message that the Muqawama, the resistance, is effective, right? And I think they've been licking their wounds since then, and now they have the opportunity to literally do whack-a-mole. Anything that comes up right now, 550 missiles have been fired from Iran to Israel. I told you, 8 to 10% have gone through. A couple have hit any target of importance. The rest have just killed civilians. That's a good record for Israel. They could weather that storm. And every time the Iranians pull out their missile launchers, the Americans are, there's a truck. It's moving from this coordinate to that coordinate. Have at her, Israel. The Iranians don't have 100,000 missile launchers. They have 1,000, 2,000. Half of them have been destroyed. So I just want to put that in perspective because I keep hearing the conversation kind of lean towards what Iran will do next. Piotr, I love it. The answer is nothing. They just physically can't. And if the Israelis continue this campaign of just knocking off these leaders, like this very, very arrogant and very audacious act that the Mossad is doing, which I sent you the Washington Post article. I don't know if you could read it. It's behind the paywall. Israelis are mocking. They're like, yeah, we're gonna. It's wild, and I don't know if they have an end game. Like when Bush told Ariel Sharon, the Prime Minister of Israel, about the Iraq invasion. What do you think of the plan? What do you think of my general's plan? This is anecdotal. I don't know if it actually happened, but apparently Sharon said, your plan's great, but I don't care about it. I care about what's your exit strategy.
I want to bring it back, just a small update. I'll go to Joa for some comments. And Ryan, can I go for an update before, or you guys have points related to the discussion? Joa?
Point about,
Joel,
go first.
Ryan, you can go. Go after. Sorry.
Yeah. Question more for the panel, so maybe it's best to go to the breaking news, but I'm wondering what country is most likely to take in IRGC if they were to claim asylum, and if the regime changed, like if the regime were to collapse, where would they flee to? And specifically for Piotr, do you think the NATO summit's going to make any effect on the situation?
So, Joa, I'll give you the response. I think Oman and Russia, maybe China, but
That's not my... James, I would trust your opinion here.
I think those three countries are the ones that are the most appropriate. I'll let you go for. We'll go to Piotr after, but I'll let Joe talk about his point. Ryan, thank you for the questions.
Yeah, my point was just that there's been a lot of analysis on here that, you know, you've heard people who have worked for the state in the U.S. and said that because this barely did anything. In Qatar, they're done. You can see they're done. They have nothing left. Blah blah blah. If you look at them ever since Trump pulled out of the nuclear agreement, they've always projected their punches. Even when they were attacked, like they had scientists killed. All they kept doing was enriching uranium and saying, "Can we please get back to the table?" Right? Trump even said that when they killed Soleimani, he got the phone call and goes, "Hey, tell your troops to stay inside the base. We're going to hit near the base, but not inside the base." Right? You don't think the same thing just happened? You don't think when we went and bombed the nuclear facilities that have no uranium in them, it wasn't a phone call? And now Trump says he got another phone call that they're going to hit the Qatar. This is all performative. This all performative. America doesn't want to get involved with Iran. Iran doesn't want to get involved with America. And this is just one big performance. And to judge today's attack as, look at them, they're so weak, I think is a really bad assessment, right? When historically, for the past 10 years, they've always projected their punches when it comes to America, every single time. Name me once when they haven't in the past 10 years. It doesn't exist, right? So they did the same thing they've been doing for 10 years, was take it soft on America. America takes it soft on them. And that's pretty much what it's been, right? Now, whether it's Israel or Iran, I hear stories that, you know, we only target military targets when we go in Iran, and Iran only targets civilian targets. Go look at the numbers. The numbers speak for themselves. There's more civilians dead in Iran than there is in Israel. Is one more targeting than the other? I don't think so. I think they're pretty equal. But to say that one is the evil hegemon that only targets civilians, that's completely untrue. And the reason you can't see it is because Israel, which is a democratic country, doesn't allow people to film. And for 3 days, they kept Americans hostage inside Israel. They weren't allowed to leave. So which one's democratic? I don't get it, right? I don't want to see war. I don't want America to be involved, but to judge today's actions as weak
before the last point,
is a bit short-sighted.
You said, Joe, just like really to precise a point. You said that there is a side that has been throwing bombs more than the others. You said it's not the case?
No. I'm talking about multiple guests up here have said that Iran attacks civilian targets and Israel only attacks military targets.
Yeah.
And anyone looking at the information knows that's not true.
It's not about specific targeting. It's not about specific target. In the number of targets, when you talk about the mathematics, so statistically, with hundreds of targets being shot, you have hundreds of cases of more death, which is, if you take them proportionally, you see the difference and you say, okay, it's practically the same in terms of mathematics, which is horrible.
That's what I said, James.
Which is horrible to do.
It's equal, but for 8 people to come up here and say the opposite is a bit ridiculous. And then they call me the agent of misinformation.
How many military casualties have Iran had? Do we know that number? Did Iran ever announce that number? No. They said 12 people. Do you really believe 12 people got hit in this whole campaign?
What 12 people?
No one's talking about 12 people. I don't know if you're
the Iranian because they announced leadership. Okay, but you want to go. It's proportionality. It's how many CIPCAs you have and compared to actual military targets and military personnel being hit. But when you're saying it's always all civilians and journalists who are pregnant.
Iran has announced 52 military deaths and soldier deaths, and 12 or 13 scientists. They've announced those.
So 52 at this point. You really believe it's 52?
Yes. Wait.
52 military in total?
62 out of 220. Yeah, seems to be a logical number.
It does not. I mean, when you're hitting launchers, and you're hitting bases with missiles, you think that there are no personnel next to the launchers? I think
those
the
numbers are
SF
not up. I'm saying that mainly the numbers that have come up from Tehran. I'm giving you the numbers that came out from Iran. Most of them came out from Tehran. It's 260 something people that are dead, and out of the 260 people that are dead, there is around 64 or 65 that are very close to the regime. Those were announced.
And
So
James, we know
another
one of
problem.
them is true because one of them hit a building, a residential building, where a majority of the deaths happened. So just on one strike accounts for almost half the
Yeah,
numbers.
it's like 50 or 60 people, but it happens in war. But I just wanted to clarify that point. Thank you, Joe. Citrap,
I think because this is something that Joe brought up, like, for example, and I think it kind of goes to this idea of Iranian military spending. I'm not here to argue or underestimate or undervalue them, and I think no military planner is going from that perspective, but he cited the 2002 military exercise that I think gets widely misunderstood and misinterpreted in this idea of somehow Iranian military strength. Number one, that military exercise that was replicating a threat by Iran. Let me remind everybody, the leader in that exercise of the Iranian military was a U.S. Marine general. Right, that's number one. Everybody who replicated Iran in that exercise were American service members and generals. That's like saying, during U.S. Army training at the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California, when the OPOR unit destroyed brigade combat teams that are deploying, that means Russia is better. Or China, or Iran, or whoever or Al-Qaeda if we replicate it. That's not the case. Military exercises and war games have various functions in how they're actually operate. But one of the key problems of them, why it's hard to use that as a metric for foreign countries, is because inherently they are done by American officers and soldiers who are trained to replicate the doctrine of the enemy, but they still have their own training. Like, never in a million years are we going to run into a situation where an American commander who's replicating an OPOR, who's replicating that, is going to act like, my non-commissioned officers wants to do something. No, you can't do it. They're going to give them, they're still going to operate that, which is antithesis to most of these countries we fight. They don't have strong interests. And the 2002 is the same construct, and there's a lot of things that people miss from that, and this idea that Iranian military power is greater than one. What I think, Joe, I would agree. Hold on.
But we weren't talking about that, right? No, just to make sure.
No. But this is something to an earlier point that I wanted to bring up, and then I'm going to bring up now. And then there's a specific point now that we're talking about within the Iranian military thing. I can understand the argument that you're analyzing it from, and this idea that they projected. And clearly, from all the reporting, the Iranians did that. I truly believe that the reasoning that's happening is because they are severely concerned. They do not want the United States involved because they know at that point it's game over. It's game over. It's done. It's done. Trump doesn't want to get in. Iran doesn't want the U.S. to get in. Now the question, it goes back to Israel-Iran. That's what the situation is. And what Israel, they're still conducting airstrikes in Tehran. They're still conducting airstrikes in Shiraz, just now while we're having this debate. And the Iranian military option and their ability to retaliate is slowly being less and less and less and less. We just look at it. We can just see what's going on. And that does show, and to say that is not because of a significant degradation of combat power from the Iranian military, I think from an analysis point, how I'm analyzing from militarily, is not true. Just like when Iran had, in some of the salvos, increased their amount of impact because they changed the missile systems they used, more specifically the munitions they were using, which was cluster munitions and early release submunitions, to get more impact because they wanted that psychological effect to kind of permeate to show that they're also hitting back. But if you're analyzing it from a purely military perspective, Israel has a lot more it can absorb before there's any degradation of their combat power, way more so than Iran. Way more so. And that's why I just don't see any impetus for Benjamin Netanyahu to stop. And to be honest, if I'm President Trump, I could tell the Iranians, I don't want to get involved. Oh yeah, I made a post on Truth Social. But why would Benjamin Netanyahu stop? And why would Trump even pressure Benjamin Netanyahu to stop? If this is what Iran does in retaliation for bombing their nuclear facilities, is launching 14 ballistic missiles against Qatar, I mean, if I'm Trump, like, okay, I'm not getting involved, and we're going back to the original conversation. Israel, this is all you. Have at it. I'm washing my hands like Russia, Ukraine. I don't want to get involved, but nothing is going to stop Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm just not seeing anything military that can stop him. Unless there's a halt of U.S. aid. Joe, I would love for you, what is going to stop Benjamin Netanyahu?
But also, yes, they've been kind of decreasing the amount of rockets they've been sending, right? Does that mean because they don't have some? I mean, Netanyahu came out today and said that they have 25,000 of them. Do you believe Netanyahu here or not?
25,000 what?
That they have 25,000 missiles.
I would love to see
Yeah,
that.
if you're talking
about rockets,
hold on. He didn't specify.
I mean,
he didn't
they don't have
specify what they
25,000 ballistic missiles. I can tell you that for a fact.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But that's
Are you sure? Maybe
Netanyahu said today.
Maybe you misheard because their ballistic missile stockpile was around 3,500. So maybe you heard 2,500 and misheard that number.
No, that's what I assumed. I assumed 4,000 at the beginning, right? So I wasn't far off. And today when Netanyahu said 25,000, I was like, what? That can't be possible.
I don't.
It's written.
Yeah,
I'll pull it up and I'll send it to you.
Even if, let's say for argument's sake, Joa, let's just say that's all true. Let's
not assume that's true because that's not going to be true.
Those ballistic missiles are short-range ballistic missiles that can't reach Israel anyway from Iran. Again, so what is the impetus? That's the thing where I'm looking at is that I think Iran wants this latest salvo to end, and I'm just not seeing any political pressure, military pressure at all against Israel to halt these operations. And I don't know where Iran, unless it's a closing of the Strait of Hormuz, which maybe try to affect the U.S., but we're not seeing any of that going. And clearly Iran is not going that direction. Quite on the opposite.
What does Israel do with it? This is what I think they're doing, to be honest, is what does Israel do without the port? I mean, then there's no port on the Levant whatsoever. Correct? I mean, they hit this illegal ammonium container that they have, that their courts have demanded to be torn down about 5 years ago. Still didn't happen because politicians were making money off of it. They hit that. They're hitting the port.
Wait,
what do they do if they don't have Haifa?
You're talking about Lebanon?
No, the Haifa port.
Yes. What's
I'm not talking about the what blew up in Lebanon. They had an illegal container of ammonium at the Haifa port that the Israeli court has demanded it be taken down because they say it's a weak point. They hit it. If they hit that again, it's extremely dangerous. Many people will die because it's extremely toxic. That's at Haifa. They've already tried to hit it once, and they did damage it somewhat, but they were able to stop it. Right? Is Haifa going to be usable? I don't know. What does Israel do without Haifa? They're already saying that they're running out of missiles to defend.
You're coming with hypotheticals, and you want us to respond to those. But let me go back to that 25,000 missiles statement. Joe, I have a question for you. Where did you get that number? Where did you get that number, 25,000 missiles? Because I just ran through it
today. And
I didn't believe it myself. Joa, I just fact-checked that. I can't find any reference to 25,000 missiles on Twitter, on Google. That number seems to be from thin air.
The only 25,000 reference is the number of damage claims that the Israeli tax authority have received because of the damage of the missiles. Please read carefully.
No, I did read carefully, and I will post it as soon as I'm done speaking, just like I posted that there was Israeli bots being taken down and everyone called me a liar as well. I'll find it and I'll pull it up. Maybe it's not 25,000, maybe it's 28,000. I don't remember. I know that I didn't believe the number.
Israel
quick question.
Just a second. Israel has another port in Riyadh. Also, in terms of weapon supply, most of the weapon supplies that come to Israel come by plane and doesn't come via boat. Most of their weapons supply and rocketry supply, they come by plane, so it will not stop their war. It might damage the internal supply chain when it comes to food, when it comes to other things.
But their economy, James, their entire economy.
Their economy has been on a standby for 2.5 years. Eilat was stopped totally from working while the Houthis were attacking in the Red Sea for 2 years. They resisted with one singular port. It will be the same thing. They will shift to another port. the question with the economy of Israel is that it is one of the most stable in the Middle East due to the model that they work with and the internal consumption. If you study the economy, one of the ways I studied the Lebanese economy, I compared it
Sorry,
to other
James,
economies.
just gonna jump in here with some news, mate. Just wanted to say the IDF has issued an immediate evacuation for District 7 of Tehran. All those in that area have to leave due to imminent strikes. I've just posted it above, but this illustrates that even if the US is wanting to draw down, quite clearly the Israelis don't. Already, right now they're going to continue for the next hours. And I think this goes back to the point that I was making for much of the space. We've discussed this as well, that the Israelis are much more of a, I won't say sort of unpredictable actor, but they're much more independent and clearly, just by what people say, they're going to continue to operate like that. So that's a bit of news there on that front. But James, did you want to finish your point?
Yeah, just talking specifically about the economy. The economy is more stable, is one of the most stable. Like the Saudis are based on a lot on the oil, and now they are shifting by 2030, 2035. They should be so diversified that they can fall. The UAE has tried to diversify, but they are still very focused on the tourism now. They were on oil, now on tourism, but they are getting the diversification with AI, with technology, with other things. The Israeli did that multiple years ago. They are
James,
in the model.
James, when Iran said, like, True Promise 1, okay, they spent anywhere from $30 million to $80 million. Do you know how much Israel spent? Any clue?
3 billion, I think.
Sorry?
Something in the billion number.
Yeah, 1.5 or somewhere around there, right? And this continues to go on, right? So Iran has said we're not using our most advanced rockets, right? Why? Because they're depleting Israel. I'm just saying, look, I'm not for Israel, as you know. It's not even Israel. I'm not for the Likud party. I wish Obama would have been able to get the left wing in power and not the Likudists that got Trump in, because to me they're a terrorist and they started by a terrorist and they still are. And new fronts keep opening up just to keep Netanyahu in power. That's my personal feeling. But to mistake and say that an enemy who has advanced technology that they don't have, the West doesn't have, they're able to get through, which they never thought would happen, is to say, oh, they're nothing. They're just like a sleeping grizzly bear. They can't do anything. I think it's a very, very irrational thing to say.
The military expectation of Israel, and if you want to read articles, I read what Israel said the same way I read what Iranians say on the other side. The Israeli did claim that they were expecting around between 800 and 1,000 casualties. The number of 5,000 someone said it before doesn't seem logical, but between 800 and 1,000 casualties in the first 10 days of the war. This did not happen. So their defenses were kind of effective. They are a community that cares about the survival of its people because they build bunkers, they build systems for detection, and they ask people to go hide, which the Iranians don't do. We've heard the claim that we have weapons, and we heard Nasrallah wave his fingers for years telling us that they will destroy any ship that comes because they have anti-ship missiles. We heard that they have surface-to-air missiles in Lebanon. We heard that they have ballistic missiles in Lebanon. We didn't see any of them. I can tell you, based on someone who talked to the Lebanese army, there was ballistic missiles in Lebanon, not too much, but some. And the Iranians did not allow Hezbollah to use them. Why? Because they were doing calculus and everything, and those were dismantled and destroyed. Iran may have 10, 15, 20, 30 rockets, 100 rockets that are new technology or something new. They will do an attack for 3-4 days, and then Israel will come in and continue for 6 months. That's the problem. The problem is in a war you need time. You need to be effective on a longer time. Iran is not effective on a long time, and thus they fail. Military.
James, I will believe you when Iran starts saying that they want a ceasefire, or that they want them to come back to the table. When that starts happening, I'll believe that maybe they're weak. Right now, it just seems like they're just waiting for a mistake. That's my honest opinion.
No, and that, I mean, I think, Joe, that's the back and forth that we got to see. But Ariel, I know you're here. I actually would love your take. Look, we see Israel just announced the District 7 District 7 is going to be evacuated in Tehran. We saw strikes in Tehran and Shiraz. So, Ariel, what are you hearing from Israeli media, Israeli military sources? Are you hearing anything specifically? Because it looks like a significant expansion of strikes today.
Everyone, thanks for having me, and pleasure to be here again. I think what we saw today was kind of unique of going specifically after regime symbols, also symbols of the government depression. I do want to hop on to the last part of the previous back and forth about who wants this to end, when I think Iran is in this for the attrition. They want to drag Israel for the long run. They kind of like we see with all the other elements in the axis, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, all they care about is the longevity of their rule. And in Iran, just like in Gaza, there is no one threatening